Japan goes after arcades. Nintendo's Famicom gets its first licensee. And gamers come together online. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man.
What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, Alex.
Happy to be here,
hi,
Carl.
Alex. Excellent. So, we haven't recorded one of these in a hot minute for those listening in real time. So, before we can turn on the time machine and head back to October of 1984, it's time for obligatory podcast banter. What have you been up to?
Traveling, Carl. Way too much traveling. Part of the reason it's been so long since we recorded one of these is I had a week of vacation and then 2 weeks of business trips.
Oh, Jesus. So you have been busy. Oh,
indeed.
Tell you that whole being a manager thing, it just seems like more trouble than it's worth. I mean, impeding on your social time with friends. I feel that this is just so wrong.
Does the bank account okay though, Carl?
You know, as a government employee, I get it. I get it. Yeah, I can report that my make a bread bin out of a bread bin project has finally come to a conclusion.
The C64 thing.
Yes. I have now decorated a bread bin to look like a C64. And I have also, and if I can, I'll share the image here with you. And I'm trying to figure out where to do that because I absolutely have not gotten the hang of Zoom yet.
Be careful, though, Carl. There's a new Commodore International in town, and they may sue you over this.
Yes. Oh, dude. So I've made this bread bin. I put an old tablet in there and a keyboard and some speakers and a mouse, and my daughter can now, use it to play some old games and run a whole bunch of applications and Scum VM and the old humongous games and blah, blah, blah. But yes, I mean, that the news that Commodore is back and its product again, obviously I looked at it all and have decided to wait a little bit longer. I want to buy myself one of those Commodore 64 X cases. It looks like a C64. It's got a more modern keyboard layout in it, and you can put a mini ITX in it. I'm just waiting. There's a guy in England that used to sell Raspberry Pi adapter kits for it. So if he puts out another Raspberry Pi adapter kit for it, I'll probably have to pick one up. But
there you go.
I'm waiting for that because I'm not putting a whole ITX into this thing. That's just not worth it. And the FPGA versions that they're coming out with the OG keyboard, I'm just like, it's nice, but I'm probably not going to get enough bang for my buck. Not dropping $300 for that much nostalgia. But hey,
indeed,
I am very glad they're back, and I wish them the best of luck. Okay, we have a ton to cover today, so we should probably get this started. Now, remember, everybody, when we do talk about the headlines from the past, we are always using magazine and newspaper cover dates, so there's obviously a little bit of wiggle room. And also, please remember that these show notes contain links and citations for all the stuff that we're going to talk about. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, as I know quite a few of you are, there YouTube does cut us off. The notes are far longer. If you look down below, you will find a link to this episode on our Patreon site, which you don't have to contribute anything to listen to it there, but you can see all the links. And if you do decide to contribute something, we would be very, very happy about that because costs. And I know times are tough, but hey, you know you want to. So with that being said, let's do our first bit of business, and that is the 7 Minutes in Heaven, the segment where our intrepid co-host must play a game that was reviewed in a publication dated October 1984 that they've never played before for 7 minutes. And we had many, many wonderful, for me, especially nostalgic titles on the list. Today we had, let's see, Hypersports in the coin-op, Archon 2, 9 to 5 Typing. Now there's a movie tie-in that you don't see every day. Raid Over Moscow. Now that's a classic, more timely than it should be. Skyfox, Boulder Dash, what else do we have? Elite on the BBC. Now there's one. Strip Poker for the Commodore 64. Now it was a little bit older, but it got a review this month, so I thought I'd put it on there just for giggles. 7 Cities of Gold, the Danny Bunton classic. But you, sir, were cornered into doing a game. I didn't give you a choice on this one.
That's true.
Because it's one of my all-time favorites, and it's something I still boot up on a regular basis. And I thought, why not? Let's do this. Lazy Jones.
I mean, I'm just happy you didn't do your normal thing, which is force me to play one of your horrific ports from childhood, like Street Fighter 2 on the C64 or something.
We will have that again. Just wait until we get to Express Raider on the C64. Now, actually, that one's actually the C64 version is better than the arcade game, but it's one of the few exceptions. So, but are you ready to be lazy and a Jones?
Let's do it.
Welcome back, Alex, from your 7 Minutes in Heaven. So, for the uninitiated, how would you explain a Lazy Jones based on your 7 minutes with the game?
Well, Carl, it is basically just a series of mini games presented for one's amusement with a little bit of plot tacked on to kind of connect them all together. Not that it really does, but yeah, just a series of arcade style mini games to while away the hours with.
And the mini games. So you mentioned a plot. What did you think the plot was?
Well, I had no idea, Carl, until you told me, because of course I'm not looking at any supplementary materials, but I could tell Guy was moving around a building of some kind and ducking into rooms and playing games for fun. And of course, his name is Lazy Jones, with that Indiana Jones kind of font style. So a distant cousin, I imagine. Yeah, so it turns out the place is a hotel and he's supposed to be cleaning it, and he's choosing instead to goof around and play some games,
as one is wont to do while at work. And so what did you think of the games?
They were simple, but they were entertaining enough considering that this is 1984 on the Commodore 64 and is loading from a cassette. So, there's only so much you can do with all of that. But, they were simple little time wasters based on common themes. like Astro Smash and Space Invaders and Defender, not the rescuing guys part, but just the horizontal scrolling part, Lunar Lander style games, a bunch of different concepts, and more that I didn't see, of course, because there's a lot of little mini games. But that's some of what I experienced, kind of a breakout derivative where you're not breaking any bricks, but you're keeping things in the air using a paddle at the bottom of the screen. So, pretty smoothly done. Some of it was a bit twitchy, though I think that was my emulation that was the problem more than the original, in terms of just control inputs seeming to register more than one very rapidly and kind of causing some overshooting and whatnot. But I don't think that was the game. I think that was the emulation. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's 15 games altogether. So you get a lot of shooters, which you saw, and if anybody checks out the video version of this, which is linked below in the show notes, a lot of that is that. There is even a version of Hero, which would have just barely come out at this point, or at least it looks a lot like Hero. And there's a Frogger clone in there and so on and so forth. And an actual Breakout clone. The one you saw with the little bouncing stuff off is similar, but there's an actual Breakout clone as well. So the side notes on this, just interesting. This was programmed by David Whitaker, who's going to become much more famous as a music composer for video games. Lots of famous titles come from him there. It's Barbarian. His soundtrack for that is absolutely phenomenal. He does Blood Money, lesser known Brave Star, but he does a whole bunch of games over the next few years. But his big claim to fame is not this. But
Sure.
But this is the one that I always kept going back to as a kid. Me and my friends was like, well, what else are we going to play? We throw this in and then try to do some high score chasing. And since it was a randomized map each time, you never knew which game you were going to get in the next door. That sort of added a little bit of fun to it. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Would you recommend this to a modern gamer?
I think it's worth a little bit of time wasting with. I mean, it's not any great work of art, but it can occupy a few spare moments. It's pretty well done considering the time period. So, would I play it for hours and hours and hours? No, I've got JRPGs for that. But it was a fun little time waster. I think it's worth checking out, especially if you like those kind of old arcadey style Twitch games.
Very cool. I can only agree. So, with that out of the way, let's check in with our good friend Ethan for a little segment we call the Department of Corrections.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So, before we get started with what we got
Wait, Carl. The revolution has begun. Rising up against the state. 1984 will no longer be like 1984.
Will it be televised? The revolution?
Do we have that technology now? Yeah, I guess. I guess it might be. But
Yes.
It will only be played in between Apple commercials. Hello, Alex, and hello, Carl. Welcome to the Department of Corrections, which still goes on despite the collapse of the state.
Cool. I mean, you got to have continuity in something.
Mm-hmm. So It is September 1984. It is 1984. So get your, signs of protest ready and march out into the streets after we grill Carl a new one and tell him all the things that he got wrong.
Okay, so tell me, what did we get wrong?
Okay, for August 1984, bing bada bing. Let's
September,
start
I
off.
believe, right?
Well, it was September. Yeah, I can't remember sometime. And by the way, once again, people, this is a long time after the episode, so if we get a little bit confused, blame Carl. Anyways, first we have the Alex comment,
Uh-oh.
like we sometimes do. But this one is more on Carl, because Carl completely dropped your Jimmy Eat World reference. For shame, Carl. For shame.
What is Jimmy Eat World?
Oh.
'Tis a band, sir.
Ah.
They did and Alex referenced the song, and you completely missed it. It was sad.
Okay. Okay. But my Alexa knows how to play me my Jimmy stuff. Okay, cool.
Okay.
I got nothing here.
Now we'll push back to September 1964, talking about the Dartmouth time-sharing system. Alex was wondering whether or not it was already operational at the time, and yes, it was. The quote-unquote birth of BASIC, which is actually really the birth of the Dartmouth time-sharing system, had already occurred by September.
Very good.
Very cool.
Kick forward a decade, September 1974. At this time, Home Pong was, in fact, in development. In fact, the final schematics of the Home Pong chip, the Darlene chip, were drawn up this month. That's something that is shared in Atari Inc. Business is Fun.
Very good.
Oh, cool.
One of the few documents of that sort, and maybe we'll find more in the future. But
Release the Atari Museum files.
Yes.
I want to know if my name's in them.
Then also on this, talking about the RCA arcade machine, alternatively called the Fredtronic or the Fredotronic, which Kevin Bunch, Atari Archive, has done an episode talking about the lead up to the RCA Studio 2, which includes that. I very much dispute that the RCA arcade machine actually had cartridges. Carl and I looked at this a little while ago, and I think it's just a board that has ROM on it. For a cartridge, you need a casing. It's not a cartridge.
I agree. The casing is actually like what makes something a cartridge. So I agree with that.
I'm going to go with that is purely semantics.
Every definition
lawyer,
is
Carl.
semantics.
Your entire life is built on semantics.
My entire life was built on logic until, of course, this administration. But no, the whole deal, my argument is that what defines a game cartridge shouldn't just be the plastic housing on the outside. It should be the idea that what it houses are chips with game data and or additional circuitry. The idea that it didn't have a plastic casing around it doesn't make it a cartridge. I mean, if you had put a plastic casing around the quote unquote cartridges, the circuit boards for the Odyssey, for the Magnavox Odyssey, that wouldn't have made them cartridges as we understand them, as we use.
I mean, that's
term.
one step. It's like you need game data, or you need programmed data, I will say, because there are applications that came on cartridge too, and you can't call that not a cartridge because
exactly.
I mean, it's not about whether it's plastic or not. It's just a cartridge is a housing. I mean, old guns fired bullets that were housed in cartridges. Like, you need a housing for there to be a cartridge. Like, it doesn't have to be plastic specifically. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to look like an Atari cartridge or a Nintendo cartridge. But a housing needs to be present, I would say.
And that's why SD cards are also not cartridges, by the way. So the Nintendo Switch does not have cartridges.
But don't they have a plastic housing surrounding the circuitry?
No, because there's the outside, the pins are exposed.
Well, wait.
Well, not pins, but, the flat, part
The
that goes in
contacts.
like that. Yeah.
So since an NES cartridge, I can see the pins.
But it's surrounded by something. Anyways, it
I'm
was
sorry, but
definitely...
that's a stretch. That's
I thought Mr.
A
Lawyer
difference without
Carl
a
didn't
difference.
operate on semantics.
no. Like I said, I'm not operating on semantics. I mean, you guys are saying that it has to be surrounded. I mean, if it sticks out a little bit,
So I'm
counts.
not necessarily strictly taking Ethan's view on that part of it, but there needs to be a housing. I mean, I am staking that on a definition of cartridge.
But anyways, the RCA Fredotronic or Fredtronic was definitely the first interchangeable programmable system that was tested in an arcade. Well, probably. You can never know what things lurk in the bushes. And very well might be the first micro processor-based arcade system that went onto a test location, as a video game system.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now to September 1984, which we were supposedly talking about all along. The September 1984 cover of Replay magazine, which is one of my favorites. And as you can see, Alex, on here, there is no Al Stone. It is Ron Judy who is on here.
Yeah, I knew one of them was and one of them wasn't, because I remember how we've talked about this before. But I couldn't remember which one was on the cover.
Unfortunately, this particular cover is the cover is on the web. In fact, I believe Jerry Momoda has a version of it on his website. But you have Jerry Momoda, Bill Cravens, Frank Ballou, Minoru Arakawa, I think that's Susan Schroenicker, and Ron Judy as the people surrounding a Nintendo Versus system.
Do we happen to know is that the University of Washington Law Library?
I have no idea.
Because I've done research
bring the picture
there.
back up.
I used to research there when I was on the speech and debate team in high school. I want to say that that's the UW Law Library, because that's clearly law books in the background.
You bring it back up.
The cover story does not say where it was taken.
But it wouldn't surprise me that would be the
it is a
place for them to do it.
Like, they've got the Versus System cartridges in special things that look like bound books, but it's all surrounded by leather-bound books. So that is a very strong possibility, because there's not that many other places that would have leather-bound books.
Yeah. Sorry. I've spent many, many hours there prepping for speech and debate competition. So, okay.
There we go.
Preparing your semantic arguments.
Please.
Indeed.
I don't lower myself to that level. Okay.
Next up, I think we weren't entirely certain if Atari had launched their console in Japan prior to this, their personal launching of it rather than Epoch's importing of the Atari 2600. But the Atari 2700, as it was called in Japan, a slightly different version of the console, did come out prior to the Famicom coming out.
And we did cover that on the podcast. We talked about the launch of the 2700 a year or two ago on the show. So
I just want to point out here that their man in Japan had the most ridiculous name, Rivington Height. Was
Wow.
Atari's man in Japan. He's dead. Cannot interview him.
Alas. Next up, the talking about the IBM PC and compatibles, whatnot, vis-a-vis the other systems that have come and gone, tried to compete against it. Alex was trying to say that what made the PC unique was is expandability, but other systems were expandable, and they all had to conform to a certain architecture. But I think what you kind of meant is that the PC is a brute force machine. Like, when it does stuff like graphics, it's not doing the fancy tricks like the Amiga, in which, you know, it was able to render way more colors than you could conventionally when you weren't doing a bitmap. The PC basically forced everything to go through just like a very straightforward architecture, and that's kind of part of why it won in the end, because it was scalable. That's the way to say it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's
totally.
And then Alex was talking about a game in which there was like a, you know, kind of proto ARG behind it. And I believe you were trying to think of Masquerade, the famous British puzzle and competition. Jimmy Mayer, the digital antiquarian, did a long deep dive on it.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you for providing the name.
Next, a Tolkien pronunciation. It is not Mordor, it is Mordor. And Professor Tolkien said it himself in audio, so we know.
One does not simply correct statements about Mordor, Ethan.
We all love those books here.
This is true.
Then you guys basically repeated an entire conversation about the Zap, the Rise and Fall of Atari. Like 2 episodes prior to this, you already talked about it, and then Carl put it in the show notes again, and you had basically the same conversation.
Okay. That does not.
At least we're consistent. Wouldn't have been? It would have been more disturbing if we had done it 2 months ago and we had a completely different conversation where we drew opposite conclusions.
In my defense, we have now done over 200 episodes of this show, so you know it's going to happen.
And finally, Atari's sales guy, the beloved and famed Don Osborne, had already died the previous year. He died on December 31st, 1983.
Right.
Of a heart attack.
Yes.
Of course. Because people in the coin-op industry die of heart attacks.
That is what gets them.
That is all for September 1984. I'll see you in the streets, and if we're lucky, the revolution may succeed. Adios, Carl, Alex. Goodbye!
Have fun. Thank you, as always, for your service.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
There'll be a hot time in the town of Berlin when the Yanks go marching in. You could never keep them happy down on the farm.
The life of these would never please, they'd shudder with alarm.
No, you couldn't keep them happy down on the farm after they take Berlin.
Welcome back to October of 1944. So, Alex, what's our first headline?
Well, Carl, it seems the coin men looking forward to VE Day.
Cashbox, the weekly magazine for the coin-op industry, is all abuzz with the first indications that production of entertainment machines may resume as soon as victory in the war is announced. Government agencies have begun to suggest that wartime uses of factories will end immediately upon the end of the war, and Bally has already announced their first machine, a pinball table named Victory Derby, that they hope to produce as soon as fighting stops. There are also signs of consolidation in the distribution level of the industry, with larger regional territories predicted after the war, in no small part thanks to the improved transportation infrastructure built to facilitate the movement of wartime materials within the U.S. This should alleviate prior issues with getting devices out of the factories in the Midwest and to the rest of the country in a timely manner.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, the coin-op industry, like so many other entertainment things, was pretty much completely shut down during the war because all of those factories were needed to produce wartime materials and supplies. And of course, things like the metal used in pinballs was needed for slightly more important things. There was a limited amount of refurbishing and redesigning where you might create a new play field because you can do that out of relatively cheap materials and put that in an old cabinet. But the industry was basically stopped during the war. And there was a lot of excitement building, thinking that the end of the war would bring about kind of a new revolution. It doesn't quite end up working that way for a variety of reasons, most notably that there were actually a lot of small town arcades that were established in all of the various towns where soldiers were training. And so all of those locations, there actually ended up being an influx of location closures following the war. And then the factories that were so happy to be producing again ended up overproducing. It didn't kill the industry, obviously, but not quite the panacea that they were hoping for.
Yeah, and like I said, this is a weekly magazine, so I checked all the issues. There's 5 issues this month, and so it starts off with this big, oh cool, things might turn out, and then immediately after that we get manufacturing will not resume anytime soon, as the War Production Board has issued a new amendment to its regulations, again barring the manufacture from new or old parts of automatic phonographs and amusement machines until the war is over. So they wanted to make sure that nobody was getting too ahead of themselves. And we also have to be clear here, when they're talking about VE Day at this point, they're not distinguishing between VE Day in Europe versus VE Day in Japan, because there will be a delay between those two events. And there's even news that laws banning pinball outright, which was the thing we covered a few years ago that was very big leading up to the war. Those laws may not be valid, as such a law in New Jersey has been overturned, and each locality will now be responsible for assessing if machines are gambling devices. Again, this is all just, the coinmen hoping and praying that they can get back into full-blown business very, very soon, because it's been a real dry spell for them.
Indeed.
Now, on to other news.
Yeah, absolutely. We have 2 headlines from 1944. Our second headline, First National Electronics Conference held.
1,500 scientists and industrialists attended the first National Electronics Conference in the USA. The hope is that the vastly expanded use of electronics during the war will lead to an equally massive use of the technology in the post-war period. Ralph Beal, an executive at RCA, called for more research and access to raw materials to fulfill the potential of this technology. Electronic devices, which have become the guides for Allied guns, warplanes, and warships, and which flash maps, facsimiles of maps, documents, and photographs to aid Allied strategy, will ensure, after the war, the sending of the printed page from one end of the country to the other in a few seconds.
Yeah, I mean, World War II was really not a war won by armies, though obviously you couldn't have done it without them, but it was truly a war won by science, and really set the foundations for that military-industrial complex that would fuel a lot of the advances in electronics and computers and lead on slowly to video games. So, milestone moment there.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that they're having this conference with so many people and they're talking about how to keep the machine going. I mean, it must have been a feeling that all the money that they were getting from the government to manufacture stuff during the war, if that ran out, I mean, can't forget that going into the war, they were in the Great Depression. There's a real fear, and this was also something reflected in the Cashbox articles about how already at this point you're getting soldiers coming back from the war who are looking for opportunities or looking for work. And the idea of, well, can we put them to work, as coinmen or as technicians and so forth? And this is one of the fears I think that's going on is, are we going to go straight back into another depression the moment that the wartime production is over? And finding ways to turn that wartime production into civilian production is a key factor here.
Absolutely.
So,
all right. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. So we're done with 1944. Let's turn on the time machine and head forward 10 years to October of 1954. And do we have a top song for 1954? We don't have a sound effect for 1954. But let's see. Mr. Sandman from the Chordettes was big at this time, apparently. So I'm going to go with that because that's a song I recognize.
Indeed.
Yes. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Okay.
Bum, 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 bum.
Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Okay. Now I want to watch Back to the Future again. Okay. What's our first headline?
Well, Carl, big milestone here. Popular Electronics debuts.
The first issue of Popular Electronics is dated October 1954. The magazine will become a major contributor to the rise of the hobbyist scene and help promulgate news and information about electronics and computing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a confluence of a couple of things here. I mean, there's what we already talked about in terms of this military industrial complex has developed, and they've been putting out a lot of electronics, and they're finding ways to transfer that wartime capacity into civilian products. But then there's also just that because it was a war of electronics, there was a lot of military surplus after the war, and a lot of that military surplus was electronics. So there were a lot of really cheap electronics available at surplus stores for, say, high school students that maybe don't have a lot of spending money but are interested in tinkering and playing around with this stuff. So there is a real hobbyist field beginning to emerge just because of the ubiquity of new and used electronics in this time period.
And it makes sense. And if you look at the advertisements and stuff, it's all about, make a career in this, here's the mail order course and all this other stuff. And there's also ads from the military, talking about how if you sign up for the military, you can get trained in all these things. So it's very clearly going after this younger set of people who are trying to figure out what they're going to do in their lives. And like you said, if you don't have that much money, so it's not really targeting the college crowd, it seems. It's really targeting a crowd of teenagers or young men who need some kind of direction. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Now, among the many interesting articles in this issue is a write-up about a GE machine, that General Electric machine, that can automatically assemble, quote, printed circuit subassemblies, end quote, using a digital computer with instructions printed on punch cards. So, as far as I can tell from the write-up, it's a programmable, automated assembly system. So it must be drawing it's either laying out the metal on the printed circuits, or it's at least putting in the transistors or something. Not quite sure, but the fact that it's programmable is already quite interesting.
Absolutely. But there's not just big movement on the hobbyist side. There's also big movement on the institutional side as well, as von Neumann joins Atomic Energy Commission.
Computer pioneer Dr. John von Neumann, who helped build the, quote, computer brain, end quote, that helped accelerate development of the hydrogen bomb, has been appointed to the Atomic Energy Commission by President Eisenhower. This comes as Dr. Oppenheimer has lost his appeal to have his security clearance reinstated.
Indeed. Yeah, very important figure in the early history of computing. And, they talk about, help build the computer brain, as they said. He really did think of computer architectures. Of course, the von Neumann architecture becomes the principal computer architecture for decades. And he really did think of them in a similar way as the human brain is organized, which is why he came up with the different parts that he did, like I/O and storage and all of that.
Yeah. And it's I mean, the fact that he's on this commission, that the importance of computer technology towards developing things like hydrogen bombs can't be understated. I mean, you can't do the calculations without these new machines. And like you said, I mean, World War II was a war won by technology at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now turning our attention to a completely different subject, but one I know is near and dear to Carl's heart, that of comics. New York magistrate resigns to head Comics Code Authority.
Oh, yeah. So New York magistrate Charles F. Murphy has resigned his post, which he has held since 1945, to take on the task of drafting a code of ethics for the embattled comic magazine industry. And I mean, I included this partially because Comic Book Geek, but also partially, as you've mentioned on the show before, there are parallels, or at least there were fears that what happened to the comic book industry, the neutering of its content for decades, that came about because of congressional pressure and ended up with the Comics Code Authority, could have been the fate of the video game industry in the 1990s.
Absolutely. Just 40 years later, not quite to the day, but close enough. No, that's absolutely true. The Hays Code is another example where if the government is giving too much free rein, whether it's doing the regulations themselves or just being able to exert so much pressure that they panic the industry into over self-regulation, it can end up in the destruction of art forms and experimentation in art forms. And the Comics Code Authority is really an example in a lot of ways of self-regulation run amok. They went a little too far, so far that when Stan Lee very famously wanted to do a Spider-Man story that showed the negative impacts of addiction. It wasn't even about, hooray, drugs are good. It was about somebody being addicted and the negative effects of that. The Comics Code Authority refused to allow them to print it, which is when Stan Lee basically and Marvel basically proved that the emperor had no clothes by saying, we'll just publish it anyway. And they did.
Hey, by then they had already killed off EC Comics, so who cared, right?
Exactly.
So we're not going to go into all of that right now, but now I think we need to turn the clock forward another 10 years to October of 1964, and this is where we get Manfred Mann singing do-a-dee-dee-dee-dee-dum-dee-dee-doo. Sorry,
so
just
good.
Looked that up. Yeah.
So fine. Carl, you nearly blow my mind.
Just nearly? I feel disappointed now in my own performance. Okay. Well, what's our first headline for 1964?
Well, it looks like UNIVAC experiments with airflow computing.
UNIVAC has announced an experimental computer that uses air flowing through plastic tubes to fulfill the basic functions of electronic computers. The new system could replace electronic computers for functions that don't require high speed at a much lower price.
Not exactly a Raspberry Pi there, Carl.
No. This I don't even want to imagine how big this damn thing would have had to be. It's obviously it is something that never went anywhere. I couldn't even find any outside references to it other than the New York Times article that's linked in the show notes. But the fact that they tried this and they announced it, I guess shows just how expensive computing was in 1964.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of maybe we can make something cheaper would have had some kind of appeal.
Indeed, especially since there may be trouble on the high end of the market, Carl, as big tech hit by defense spending cuts.
GE, RCA, and IBM, the three titans of the tech industry, have all had their revenues hurt by considerable cuts to defense spending as per their latest financial results.
Luckily for them, we will soon need to calculate kill ratios in a little country called Vietnam. So I think they're going to be okay in the long run, Carl.
Yeah. I mean, this is this lull after the Korean War is over, and suddenly the money isn't flowing in. But you're right. Unfortunately, for many, many people, this is about to get hot again.
Absolutely. But meanwhile, we turn our attention to a different hot craze of the time as bowling gets computerized.
Doban Labs, or Duban, not sure how to pronounce that, of Sunnyvale, California, has developed the first fully automatic scorekeeper for bowling, the ScoRite. The system uses light sensors to detect which pins are standing and keeps track of the scores via a computer. Can even pause one player's round and continue counting for other players if you need to get up and get a drink.
Yeah, this was getting more towards, I think, the tail end of the huge bowling boom in the United States, but it had become quite a pastime in the 1950s. And it was a technological space because, I mean, the boom had really been started by the invention, or at least the first mass adoption of automatic pin setters, which revolutionized the sport. So it's no surprise that as the sport continues to be popular, technology is continuing to play a role in the game because it's technology has been important to the entire popularity of bowling.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, it also cuts down on the personnel. And let's face it, you don't want a whole bunch of half-drunk, middle-aged people who are dealing with PTSD suddenly clobbering each other over whether or not one of the pins is still standing.
Indeed.
Okay.
Don't talk about the war.
So let's jump forward one more time, and now we do have an actual sound clip for this. Thank you, Ethan. To October of 1974.
1974. You'll talk to the computer. After the eyes flash.
Welcome to October of 1974. Alex, what's our first headline?
Well, Carl, it seems an ASCII code extensions proposed.
The American Standard Code for Information Interchange, or ASCII, set of standardized symbol encoding that dates back to 1961 and has been revised several times, is set to undergo an additional set of revisions. The main point of these is to clarify some of the symbols, such as vertical lines, as well as to allow for additions to the system, which is limited to 128 characters, so that expanded alphabets, non-Greek letters, and mathematical symbols can be added to the set.
Which means we can have more monsters in Rogue, right?
Well, that's the thing. The reason I wanted to mention this, even though there's been many additions to ASCII before this, and we are talking 74 here, these additions seem to be the big revision of 77. And what it's doing is, number one, it's expanding it beyond the 128 characters, which was a major limitation. But by adding all the other character sets, is takes it away from just being an American standard code and allows ASCII to really become a code that the entire world can embrace. And that is going to be hugely important for communication. I mean, in the entire era prior to real graphics, I mean, ASCII graphics as we know them would not be possible without this extension. So we're going to get a big revision in 77 and then another big implementation in 83. And from that point forward, I mean, ASCII is then the standard that we're still using today.
Absolutely. Turning our attention then to coin-op news, Atari debuts Touch Me.
Atari Inc. has ventured beyond video games for the first time with a new game called Touch Me. The device has players repeating an ever lengthier pattern of colors and sounds via 4 face buttons on a console. 3 mistakes and it's game over. The game will later get a handheld conversion replicating the pattern of the more famous take on the concept, Simon.
Indeed. Simon itself, of course, being inspired by Ralph Baer seeing Touch Me at an arcade or a coin-op trade show. Fun fact there, according to, I think it was Steve Bristow that said this back in the day, but when Atari debuted its Touch Me handheld, they got a cease and desist letter from Milton Bradley's attorneys. And according to Bristow, he responded to it by just including a flyer of the original arcade Touch Me. And as he put it, they never heard from the lawyers again. Milton Bradley really didn't want to go there.
Yeah. And, it's kind of scary how strong this concept is. My daughter, she's 5. I picked up for like $1 a little electronic version of Simon, like a pocket version, and she still plays that thing all the time. It's kind of scary how so simple and yet so unbelievably addictive it is. Now, granted, the 4 buttons in a row thing that the Atari design has is not nearly as compelling as 4 buttons in a circle or a square pattern, but still.
And it didn't have the same notes. It didn't sound the same either. I mean, Bear did make a couple of improvements, but it did all start here in 1974.
Yeah, definitely.
Turning our attention then to the Far East, where Sega sponsors video game tournament.
Sega Enterprises Limited of Japan has hosted that country's first TV game championship. The 16 contestants were chosen through local tournaments at 300 local arcades. The winner was 28-year-old Osamu Kuroda, who won a 20-inch color TV after coming in first playing table hockey, a Pong clone from Sega.
Indeed, one of the very first video game competitions on record.
Yeah, there's pictures of the whole thing, and the young man standing there, and he's like, "I guess I won" or something. He has a little bit of a confused look on his face, but very, very cool. And the fact that they're immediately bringing in this competitive thing, gotta be the best. Very Japanese, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, we're done with the 70s. Everybody, I know you clicked on the icon. You want to go to the 80s. You desperately need to find out what was happening in October of 84. So let's turn on the time machine and head forward another 10 years to October of 1984.
Worldwide electronic violence. 1984.
An awful lot of product that was inferior.
Welcome to October of 1984. Alex, what's our first headline?
Well, Carl, it's a shocker in the world of toys as Hasbro buys Milton Bradley.
Storied board game maker and Vectrex manufacturer Milton Bradley has been acquired by toy giant Hasbro for $360 million. The new company has been named Hasbro Bradley Inc.
Indeed, and it is my
today.
Yes, and it is my understanding that the need for Milton Bradley to sell out stemmed almost entirely from its disastrous foray into video games.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus in the publications of the time as well. And we've been following this story for a while. I mean, Milton Bradley just got wiped out by the Vectrex.
Absolutely. But some companies that looked like the video game industry was going to destroy them are coming back, Carl, as Warner returns to profitability.
Finally released from the albatross that was Atari, Warner Communications was able to post a profit of $24.4 million for the quarter spanning July to September. Big hits like Gremlins and Purple Rain, as well as increased sales in its music division, helped the company.
Yeah, I mean, video games, part of the reason Warner wanted in video games is because at that time in the late 70s, the movie and the record businesses were really flagging. And of course, now that video games are crashing and burning, movies and music are in again, and not entirely coincidentally. So, as you said, once they could get rid of those home assets, which is where the real losses were, they could finally start cashing in on the revival of those other business areas that used to be the prime businesses at Warner pre-Atari.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, we've been talking about this, how the movie business has been doing well for them for the last 2 years. And the music business is obviously definitely being helped out by the likes of MTV. I mean, Purple Rain is all about that music clip that keeps running over and over again on MTV. So they're definitely profiting from a lot of this at this point. And I mean, obviously they'll never have to worry about Atari again.
Yeah. And, I know I said this in previous episodes. I really do sometimes remember what I said previously, Ethan. But I still think that coin-op was kind of the catalyst. I think coin-op is what made music and movie executives realize, oh shit, teenagers spend a lot of money. We should make movies and music that appeals to the young generation, and they just might spend a lot of money on it.
There's definitely, I think, an argument to be made there, because music hadn't really understood that up until now. I mean, we just talked about a Foxtrot album, a single, for God's sake. Now, granted, still, but yeah, I mean, this whole idea that you target that one group, I mean, other than maybe Elvis beach movies, this was, not a truly understood phenomenon.
But of course, Warner is not entirely done with that albatross of Atari as Atari Games Inc. established.
Warner Communications has kept one portion of Atari, its arcade division. The division will now be known as Atari Games Inc. And John Ferrand, I think I'm pronouncing that right.
It's probably Ferrand, yeah.
Yeah, has been named president, with friend of the show Kevin Hayes as CFO. And Shane Breaks will be in charge of sales. Atari has been farming out manufacturing for a while, but a new facility in Sunnyvale will house not only manufacturing, but also all of the R&D and management.
Yeah, now obviously to a degree, because I mean, we're telling the history, but we're also telling the history as it was reported. So this is how Replay kind of characterized this. So I imagine that Warner and Atari were seeing this as kind of, this is our big reintroduction to the world after getting rid of those other assets. In point of fact, this isn't quite right. I won't go into detail on the corporate shenanigans because we have a lot to cover, but basically Atari Games Inc. was just Atari Inc. renamed. And the arcade division was the primary asset still left. Technically, they had a few other tiny things floating around, mostly investments, real estate. I think they may have still had the Atari Adventure arcades at this point. They had them during the Atari Games Inc. period. I just don't know exactly when they sold. I'd have to look. Department of Corrections can tell us next time. So this wasn't actually the establishment of a new company. It was really a name change and then a reshuffling of executives. The Atari Games that people think of as Atari Games, which is actually Atari Games Corporation, not Inc., won't be established until the beginning of 1985.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's going to be a shuffling of a lot of different things, but you're right. And Replay, and as Warner is trying to sell it, Atari, the coin-op maker, is back. There's new people in charge. Come and see our wares at the upcoming AMOA show, which we'll be talking about in a little bit.
Absolutely. But what about that other Atari, Carl? Well, it looks like Jack is looking for cash.
On September 13th, Jack Tramiel, head of Atari Corporation and former co-founder and CEO of Commodore International, invited a select group of venture capitalists to the Mark Hopkins Hotel in San Francisco. He offered them debentures, which they could later convert to Atari Corporation stock once the company went public. Tramiel plans to raise $50 million in a public offering next year and a second round in 1986 for the same amount. This and a hefty cash infusion from Warner will help him get Atari sales of $500 million up to $1.2 to $1.5 billion. Tramiel told the potential investors that he plans to continue to sell video games, but with carts at significant discounts, while focusing on cost-reduced versions of Atari's 8-bit computers to compete with the Commodore 64, a 16-bit computer to be sold through mass retailers like Sears and Kmart, and a $1,000 workstation for 3D design.
Yeah, we don't have to go into super detail because we've talked about this as it unfolds, but basically Jack needs a bridge. He bought the company basically for debt. The incentive, the carrot from Warner was, oh, you get all of these receivable accounts that you'll have the privilege of collecting on. Turns out they were mostly non-collectible. And so Jack's coming into this with no money and a need to put out exciting new products like 16-bit computers. And so he has hat in hand to try to get there.
Exactly. And he's definitely, debentures is a nice way of saying junk bonds.
Yeah.
And so he is, and this is really 1984, 85, 86. These are going to be the years of the junk bonds. This is right before Mike Milton completely crashes everything in that market.
However, it turns out he was not a criminal for doing that, Carl. Not a criminal is the final determination. He was pardoned.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. If history has any justice, we will finally get rid of the pardon power of the president. But okay, I'm going off on a tangent now. Okay, sorry. Now, a couple of side notes here.
I had to bait you.
Yeah. A couple of side notes here since we're talking about Atari Corporation, the home division. Now, first, Electronic Games Magazine reports that Atari has dropped the price of the 2600 to just $60 and discontinued the 5200 and dropped its price to just $90. So they're just trying to liquidate those. And in sort of news also around this, Manny Gerard has left Warner Communications Inc. after 10 years with the company. The exit is a clear result of the Atari fiasco, a subsidiary that reported to Gerard, who was head of Warner's consumer electronics division.
Yeah, and not just that, but was also one of the members of Warner's Office of the President, and had really been trying to ride the Atari wave to become Steve Ross's successor. And here is the result.
Yeah, I don't think that promotion is coming anytime soon.
Indeed. But while Jack may be looking for cash, his old company sure isn't, as Commodore financials break records.
For the 7th year in a row, Commodore has announced record sales and earnings. Year-over-year sales for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 1984 rose by 86% to $1.27 billion, and profits rose 63% to $143.8 million.
Of course, we have to point out that since their fiscal year ended in June 1984, half of that period, including the holiday for that period, was in 1983 when the home computer market was booming. Not so sure, Carl, that they're really going to keep that momentum going in fiscal 1985.
Well, to quote, what's his name? The guy who developed the 6502.
Chuck Peddle.
Yeah. We quoted Chuck Peddle about a year and a half, 2 years ago on the show, where he said, Jack, when he was still at Commodore, he's going to have a very rosy near-term future, but there's nothing in the pipeline at Commodore. But as we've already reported, they've purchased the Amiga, so obviously they can't screw that up. Now, a quick note here on these glowing financial reportings. Shares did dip following the announcement, as analysts expect that the future of the company looks uncertain. So it's not that we're just seeing it with rose-tinted glasses, sorry, not rose-tinted. It's not that we're just looking at it with hindsight. At the time, everybody already knew the emperor doesn't have any clothes.
Indeed. And speaking of companies about to hit a rough patch after a period of sustained success, Apple numbers soar.
Apple's fourth quarter profits jumped sixfold over last year to $30.8 million from $5.1 million, but their year-over-year earnings were down from $76.7 million to just $54.1 million. $4.9 million of the quarterly profits were due to changes to the tax code, while sales were up to a record $1.5 billion, a rise of 54%. Overall, though, the operating income fell to just $91 million from $129 million in 1983. John Sculley, Apple's president, said that the year was filled with unparalleled challenges for Apple, but that they survived the industry shakeout as an innovator and attributed their success to their two new computers, the Mac and the Apple IIc, but the older Apple II line is still their chief revenue generator.
And of course, again, this is a moment in time because there was a huge amount of enthusiasm initially surrounding the launch of the Mac. And then it became clear very quickly that sales were not going to reach targets. But for now, they're still kind of bathing in the after effects of a high profile, if not completely successful, Macintosh launch.
Very true. I mean, we reported on a few episodes ago, months at this point. We're so far behind. So a few episodes ago, how they had the Apple II Fest, and sort of Jobs had to show up as a sideshow showing off his Mac while everybody's celebrating the Apple II. I mean, they're going to have to keep living off of that Apple II because the Mac, until it gets a hard drive, until it gets a lot more memory, is pretty much a paperweight. And it's just going to be so damn expensive. Hopefully nothing comes along that, surpasses it in the looks, but or can function just like it. But we'll see that when we get to the computer news later on. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, foreshadowing.
Indeed. But while the winners of the last round of computer price wars rest on their laurels, the losers continue to deal with the fallout as TI settles investor suit.
Texas Instruments will pay $12 million to settle a class action suit filed by stockholders who claim that company officers violated federal securities laws. The suit stems from public statements made about the health of the company's home computer business, which turned out to be far less rosy than portrayed. TI and several execs named in the suit maintain that they did nothing wrong but have agreed to the settlement in order to avoid costs and not distract management.
Indeed.
Yeah. They lied. They're paying a small penalty, but as we've already reported in previous jumps, Texas Instruments is back to profitability, and most of those investors, as long as they held on to the stock, are probably going to be okay in the long run.
Absolutely. Moving then across the pond, where we have the fallout of another epic collapse as Ocean buys Imagine.
UK publisher Ocean has bought the rights to the Imagine name and assets out of receivership. While most of the back catalog had already been sold to Bo Jolly, one completed C64 game, Baseball, will now be released by Ocean using the Imagine label under the name World Series Baseball, and further titles will be developed as premium games using the Imagine label. 6 titles a year are planned, and a handful of Imagine developers will be kept on at Ocean in a separate quote-unquote cell.
I mean, they probably all deserve to be in cells after what happened at Imagine, right? Yeah, I mean, this is just picking over scraps. I mean, you can see some of the logic here because Imagine was a big marketing success story, less a big we actually make good games story. So that Imagine name still maybe has a little bit of power even after appearing going bust live on commercial breaks. But so I can kind of see why it might make sense to do a low risk, low reward pickup of the label.
And Ocean is going to use it quite effectively. They're going to put it on primarily their Konami arcade ports.
Mm-hmm.
Games like Green Beret, for example, will get it, and that's an amazing port of the arcade cabinet. And it is going to sort of feel like a sign of quality. Whereas the Ocean name isn't always going to be that. So, so the Imagine games, they're not going to use it for very long, I think 2 years or something, but it is going to at least have that extra cachet, and it's going to differentiate some of the product.
Absolutely. And speaking of picking over the corpse of Imagine, Sinclair buys rights to Bandersnatch.
Sinclair Research has bought the publishing rights to Imagine's mega game Bandersnatch and is financing its completion/rewriting as a QL title. Development is being handled by former Imagine staff Dave Lawson, Ian Hetherington, Eugene Evans, Tom Flannery, Michael Glover, Andrew Sinclair, and 3 or 4 others who have set up a new company. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Psygnosis. According to Lawson, 7 games were in development and they were to be released on ROM cards. No decision yet on the medium to be used for the QL versions. Originally, the games were to cost £40. All royalties generated by the games are to go to Imagine's creditors.
Can we put them on microdrive, Daddy? Can we? It would be ever so fun. No, again, this is Sinclair trying to play on the cachet, the QL, as we've talked about in many episodes, as we tracked the saga of, I forget which computer magazine it was, that was waiting for their computer to arrive.
It was Popular Computer Weekly.
Popular Computer Weekly. Very good. Yes. It was meant to be this next step, this serious business computer. It's fallen on its face. And now they're like, maybe we can try to pivot it into games. And that Imagine name had some cachet. So obviously they're not going to make much money on this since royalties are going to the creditors. But I think they're hoping that a little bit of that Imagine name will rub off and save the QL.
There's that. And also we have to remember this game was being hyped as so big that you weren't going to be able to put it on a regular system. So the idea of moving it to a 32-bit system kind of makes sense if you bought into the hype. Now, I don't know this for certain, but the game that's going to come out of this is going to be their very first release, and that is one second, Bradicus. So this game is going to become Bradicus. And Bradicus, curiously enough, is going to be released on 3 different computer systems: the Amiga, the Atari ST, and the Macintosh. What do all 3 of these have in common?
They're not the QL.
Well, but they're all 68,000 processors.
Yes.
And the QL has a dumbed down version of the 68,000. So as far as I can tell, they're going to use the funding from Sinclair to start rewriting the program for the 68,000 in the QL. And that's going to allow them to then port this game over to these other 68,000 base systems.
Clever.
And that's really going to be the launch for them. I mean, I don't know if any of the funds generated by Bradicus end up going to the Imagine creditors, or if the change of name wipes that out. I have no idea, but
sure.
Yeah. So, little side note here: Imagine alums are starting to spread out throughout the industry. With fellow Liverpool publisher Argus Software has picked up Imagine's Paul Clancy, who will work on their first big license, Alien. And this is a curious one, because this is one of the first examples of a phenomenon that's going to happen over the next 10 years, or I should say the rest of the decade, the next 6 years, where quite often you're going to have the same license, either arcade port or movie, is going to get very different treatments in North America and in Europe. So there's going to be a video game based off of Alien, the first Alien movie, in North America from one publisher, and there's going to be a completely different game released in Europe using the same movie license.
And indeed, that publisher is the subject of our next story, as Activision to spend big as computer game maker.
Yes, Activision has put out a press release talking about its plans to spend $1 million on advertising this Christmas season. They make no bones about the platforms they will be targeting, as the press release starts out with, quote, Activision Inc., a leading home computer software manufacturer, announced Wednesday it will spend in excess of $1 million through the holidays to promote its current best-selling titles in television and print advertising, end quote. They go on to talk extensively about promotions for Pitfall 2, Ghostbusters, and Decathlon, but never mention the 2600 versions. This announcement was followed days later by Activision announcing their quarterly numbers, which showed that their year-over-year sales for the quarter fell by almost 50%, from $13.2 million in 1983 to just $7.6 million, and their net loss grew year-over-year from a loss of $4.1 million in 1983 to $5.2 million in 1984. This means that Activision has already lost $8.8 million in the first 6 months of the fiscal year, but $6 million of that was write-downs on unsold inventory and the closing of facilities.
Indeed. And really, the only thing that they have going for them at this point, other than the fact that they still have some pretty talented game designers working for them, is that they had managed to go public earlier in the year. And so even though they were losing money every quarter, they were flush with cash because they went public. Actually, it was the year before. It was in 83 they went public. But they're still flush with cash from that at this point, which is why they can afford to try and spend $1 million on advertising to try to get something going in the home computer space.
Exactly. And I mean, it is weird that I guess it's weird that they're trying to pivot to the home computer space with titles that originated on the 2600. But I don't think that they've had time to develop new titles yet at this point.
I think that's exactly right. They knew that at some point they were going to be switching to home computer software, but the crash took them by surprise the same way it took everyone else by surprise. And so they hadn't been ready for that transition. And so they basically just had to throw whatever they could into that new market to try to keep going.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I should correct myself. Alien, the first Alien, while it got a 2600 game, there is only one Alien game. Aliens is the one that's going to get not one, not two, but 3 different home computer ports and game designs.
And it's Aliens that I was thinking of in the context of Activision as well. Because I think the Alien 2600 game is 20th Century Fox Games, I think.
Yeah, that's a 2600. Yeah.
Whereas Activision will be the publisher of the North American publisher of Aliens, I do believe.
Yeah. They're going to do a game. Then there's going to be a European Aliens game that's sort of like a first-person shooter type thing, and Square is actually going to do an MSX game,
indeed,
which is a side-scrolling shooter. So, yeah, fun stuff. And of course, there's also going to be the arcade game by Konami.
Yes. Now we will return across the pond, however, as PCS going into bankruptcy.
PCS, one of the UK's largest software distributors, has been hit hard by the current summer slump in software sales and has filed for bankruptcy. This leaves many smaller software houses, which are already struggling, owed some £60,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure a lot of people, even in the United Kingdom, realize this because most of their dedicated computer game players came of age just a couple of years later. But there was actually a crash in the British computer game market. Now, it had nothing to do with the North American video game crash and all that, obviously, not trying to tie together those things. But the rise of piracy and the rise of budget software, starting with Mastertronic, really upended the British industry. And obviously the whole thing didn't collapse, but it did need a kind of massive reorganization in kind of the 83 to 85 period into something different, and the form that people basically remember the glory days of the Speccy and the C64 now.
Yeah. And the other thing that's rising that's sort of going to help everybody here a little bit, and I just concluded my interview with Gary Bracey that should be hitting the feeds before the end of the year, is that we're going to get a 3-tier system in the UK for the use for the exploitation of software titles. So there's going to be the initial launch at quote unquote full price. Then there's going to be a reuse of the title in a compilation, and that's going to be followed by a budget re-release. That's going to become the new norm. And we're already seeing that here this month, because this comes as more and more UK publishers are going the budget route with, like you said, with a flood of cheap titles. And there's a company called Computer Records, and they're just cut deals with Ocean, Quicksilver, and Anirog to release a 12 games on one tape compilation of older titles for just $12.99. And this compilation box thing is still huge, or at least was huge in Europe until a few years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have a couple of these from like 20 years ago, that these big boxes with like 10, 12 CDs with 12 previously full price games, that I'd pick up for like 15 or 20 euros. Yeah. And this is going to be the business model, and it never really picks up in the States. I mean, there's a few compilations here and there, but it's never the business model in the US, but it definitely is over here.
Yeah. It was so successful. It was briefly tried in the US in the late 1980s. But never took off in the same way.
Yeah. I kind of wonder why. I mean, was it just resistance from the retailers or what?
Yeah, it's a good question. I really haven't delved into it that seriously. I just know that suddenly in the mid '80s, companies like Electronic Arts and Activision were starting to tout budget lines in the United States, which they said at the time were based on the UK model. I mean, they weren't even hiding the inspiration, but obviously it never really went anywhere. So returning then to our trifecta of Aliens publishers, Konami goes public.
Konami Industry Company had their IPO on the Osaka Stock Exchange on Monday, October 1st, 1984. The stock opened at 8,300 yen a share, 1,000 yen higher than its official standard price, generating 2.94 billion yen or $11.98 million for the video game maker.
Of course, Konami has had a string of arcade hits in the early '80s, either released by themselves or through third parties, like Scramble, Frogger, and most recently Track and Field. And so now they're reaping the rewards of that success during the so-called golden age of arcade games.
Yeah, and it's curious also. This is all coming from Japanese sources, from GG Press, and they're talking about Konami as a video game maker. So Konami, as you've talked about on your show extensively, has a history also of being, in pachinko and a bunch of other stuff. But none of that is getting mentioned in this IPO reporting. It's all just they make video games.
Exactly. Something a little bit more respectable, because it might not be the best time to be advertising that you're involved in Japan in those coin-op games and arcades, as we have a Japanese arcade law to report on.
Oh, yes. A new version of Japan's Fui-ho law was established on August 8th and officially announced on August 14th. Fui-ho, and I'm probably killing the pronunciation, refers to the law concerning businesses affecting public morals and regulates all manner of business. The new version creates a licensing system for so-called Operation Number 8 game machines. What is still unclear, though, is whether these machines include video games or not. Japanese Coin-Op Mag Game Machine has a breakdown of the positions taken by the Japan Amusement Machinery Manufacturers Association, aka JAMA, which thinks that only machines apt to be used for gambling should be subject to the system, while the Nihon Amusement Machine Operators Association, aka NAO, says it should apply equally to all types of game machines. The law says it applies to all, quote, slot machines, video games, and other games that can be used for games which may stir up the gambling spirit, end quote, and those stipulated in the rules of the National Public Safety Commission. Sadly, the commission in question hasn't established any rules yet, but the National Police Agency has said that they plan on applying it to all game machines, regardless of what the politicians who pass the law think. Why the NAO, the Operators Association, seems to be okay with this is unclear, but JAMA is furiously lobbying to stop the system from going into effect.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big deal. This is something that we've been talking about following for the past few months. We've also been talking about how companies like Nintendo have been pulling back from the coin-op industry in fear of this happening, because this is really bad. It's not just that there could be regulations. The regulations themselves are bad enough. But this is a law that was specifically designed to regulate areas of moral decay and businesses that could damage the healthy development of children. This is a law that was used to regulate like the sex industry and bathhouses and all of these unsavory establishments. And so linking coin-operated entertainment to these other categories of adult entertainment is going to have a profound impact just beyond the custom that is lost through regulation, because now these are going to be mentioned in the same breath as other entertainments that are said to corrupt the youth.
Yeah. And why the operators want all the machines to fall into the same category, while the JAMA people don't. I mean, the JAMA is representing the video game makers. So that makes sense that they don't want to be associated with everybody else. But I guess the operators are making so much of their money off of the gambling machines. I guess they don't want to have to, split up their operations probably.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're probably also threatened by the idea that other entrepreneurs will set up like pure video game arcades or whatever, that Sega will set up pure, which is already in the game center business, because the manufacturers will just set up pure video game arcades using their machines that drive them out of business, because those places will get more custom because they're not being regulated. I'm sure that's part of the reason that the operators are far more leery about having, this double standard.
I didn't think about it in that way, but that makes a lot of sense and is a great transition.
Indeed, to our next headline, as Japanese arcades diversify.
This summer brought 3 new hybrid arcade formats to Japan. Universal Lease Company Limited opened Jet Set in, I'm going to kill the names, Ichinomiya City on July 14th. Namco Limited opened Chips in Chiba City on July 22nd, and Taito Corporation opened High Tech Plaza in Tsukuba Academic City on August 1st. The 3 new locations vary somewhat in the equipment and look, but all have one thing in common: to create a location that offers both food and games in a clean and family-friendly environment. Jet Set features robots, movies shown on 100-inch screens, and an American playing cafe feel. And by that, they're talking sort of like the Chuck E. Cheese type thing. Mm-hmm. Universal has already opened a Jet Set in Reno, Nevada, as well, and plans more locations throughout Japan and the U.S. Namco's Chips has a family restaurant, a shop selling, quote, character items, a fast food station, a game including kiddie rides, 5 MSX computers running Namco games and coin-op games, but the center uses its own medals worth 50 yen each. The shop has 2 types of medals. Some are only good for the games, while others can be used for the games or for food from the fast food station, and chip girls walk around making buying more chips easy. Taito's High-Tech High-Tech, I wrote High-Tech Playa here, and I'm not quite sure if I meant High-Tech Playa or High-Tech Plaza.
You called it Plaza.
It's Plaza. It's
on,
Plaza, yeah.
Probably is, yeah.
It's definitely Plaza. High-Tech Plaza is near the Tech University and was intended for its students, but has attracted families as well. It has a driver's school using Taito's Play Robot system, TX1 Jumbo, a version of the 3-screen eraser using 100-inch screens, a multiplayer corner that allows 7 players simultaneous play, a microcomputer room with 7 machines, and a disc jockey room where the university's broadcasting club puts on their own radio shows.
Yeah, no, this is all a response to the attack on coin-operated amusements and game centers as being morally degenerate places. The theme throughout the next several years of the 1980s from all of the major Japanese coin-op companies is to create bigger, cleaner, more well-lit, friendlier establishments for coin-operated games to counter this idea that they lead to moral decay and inhibit the development of Japanese youth.
Yeah. And I mean, it's moral scares, moral panics. Gotta love them. But given the widespread use of the gambling machines as well, it kind of makes sense that they need to differentiate it. And just having locations where those machines are not present kind of solves that problem. But yeah, most of these, I mean, we got Namco and Taito opening up their own facilities, like you said, because the manufacturers are also operators in Japan. Yeah, the operators are probably scared.
Absolutely. Things are not so great for the operators in the United States still, however, though Chuck E. Cheese operations normalize.
While Pizza Time Theater continues to go through Chapter 11, its operations have continued and begin to normalize. Their old debts are with the court, but their suppliers have now shifted back from a cash basis to normal invoice payment status. Pizza Time's merger with rival Showbiz Pizza Place is also still being negotiated.
Which probably has a lot to do with the sudden new vote of confidence by the suppliers in Chuck E. Cheese, a company whose days are numbered.
Yeah, the name will live on, but the corporate structure will not.
Indeed. Meanwhile, though, in those arcades that are still functioning normally, fighting games are all the rage.
The U.S. coin-op biz has been in the dumps since mid-82, but there appear to be a few glimmers of hope as Nintendo's Punch-Out has become a huge seller and Data East's Karate Champ looks to blow it out of the water. The one-on-one fighting game, which first shipped as a single-player-only affair, has now gotten a two-player version, which means that even at 25 cents a play, operators will be making 50 cents per game as players beat each other up.
Yep, everything's cyclical. The coin-op industry and the home industry had separate crashes. The coin-op crash started a little earlier in mid-1982, as you said. And so now it's getting to the point where it's starting to hit an uptick again. And really, it's that ability, more powerful systems that are able to properly animate human beings are leading to new types of games, particularly the fighting games that are drawing a renewed interest over the fare of just a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at a Punch-Out game, it does not look like a game from 1984. It is so beautifully designed. I mean, once you see it in motion, yeah, you can see that it's a little jumpy, but it just looks so damn pretty. Yeah, I can see how it was attracting people into the arcades. I didn't include it in here, but there was a comment in one of the magazines this month about Spy Hunter. And it was a little derisive. It said, yeah, it's fun, but hey, given how in the doldrums everything is right now, this is a strong game for this market. Yeah. And I thought that was just kind of a weird acknowledgement of where the market is in this review of the game. Didn't include it because it's not really relevant, but yes.
Absolutely. But of course, the industry is continuing to change in response to that little blip. And it looks like the AMOA set to be the battle of the carts.
In the run-up to the coin-op industry AMOA show, both Bally Sentai and Nintendo of America held big dealer-oriented events to promote their cartridge-based coin-op systems. The Sentai SAC-1 and 2 and Versus system, respectively. Nolan Bushnell, chairman of Bally Sentai, and Bob Lundquist, the company's president, presided over the show and presented the 8 new games for their revamped SAC-1 system. Not all were complete yet, but they did cover a wide gamut of games, with Chicken Shift. Don't forget the
F. Gotta be careful. Yeah. It's a family show.
Yeah. Being the one that impressed attendees, according to Replay Magazine, the most. Bushnell seemed especially enamored of the business model whereby the operator would pay an upfront fee of $3,500 for the cabinet and then a weekly rental fee of $18 for the game, and can switch them out regularly with other games from their local dealership, comparing the system to the way an operator would program a jukebox. Nintendo, on the other hand, introduced a new 2-in-1 cart versus pinball and versus golf. This allows each of the two versus cabinet screens to play a different game. Nintendo says they have already sold about 10,000 versus cabinets and are building up to 250 more per day on their factory floor. Dedicated punch-out cabinet orders permitting. Nintendo also announced that they have 2 more games coming for Versus by AMOA, Versus Wrecking, and a conversion of Punch-Out. Frank Belouz, Howard Lincoln, Minoru Arakawa, and other Nintendo heavyweights all spoke at the event. Sales manager Bill Craven said about the rush by manufacturers to get into quick change game systems, quote, "We are way out in front in this program. We have the finest hardware in the Versus hardware that's expandable to accommodate more exotic games as we develop them further along. But for anyone to score with a system, he's got to have the games. And I think we've proven we have them," end quote.
Yep, nothing new here really, except just the trend is continuing. One of the more ruinous things about the golden age and the way it fell apart was that everything in the US was just sold in a cabinet form where you had to buy a whole cabinet with each game. There's a lot of, even though kits are coming in, there's a lot of resistance to kits because it opens the way to more parallel importing and piracy, and also it just really beats up the cabinets. And so system hardware is kind of being sold as the wave of the future, where you buy our system and then we'll keep providing you great games that you can swap in and out at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, and the 2 big things I wanted to point out here was, number one, Bushnell's honestly kind of insane business model here of having to pay a weekly rental fee for the games is just like, come on, dude. This just feels like nickel and diming people, and I can't see the operators wanting to go down this route, especially with a $3,500 cabinet. I don't know how much a Versus cabinet costs at this point. I tried to figure that price out, and I'm not. Do you have any idea what they were going for around this time?
No, not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah. But, it couldn't have been, it was definitely not $3,500. I don't think they were charging that much for a Versus cabinet. And the other thing I thought was interesting was that they've announced that there will be a Versus port of Punch-Out, which of course is more or less the NES/Famicom version of Punch-Out. And I don't, we're going to see whether or not that is considered a hit. But I've got a feeling that if that sells well, that might be the catalyst for Nintendo to say, wait, why are we bothering with the big expensive hardware anymore? Let's just keep doing these cheap Famicom games. People are popping money into them. So, but yeah, if Punch-Out is the last dedicated arcade game from Nintendo, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know it for certain, but it feels like this could be, the catalyst. Is like, we're making more profit off of this cheap NES cart than we are off of building these Punch-Out cabinets, which are actually slowing down our manufacture of Versus cabinets.
Indeed. And we end our Coin Op news this month with a true sign that video games have arrived as a cultural force, as video games donated to Smithsonian.
The National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C., part of the Smithsonian, was gifted 4 arcade games: Pong, Pac-Man, Sharpshooter 2, and Dragon's Lair.
One of these things is not like the other.
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah, not quite sure what Pac-Man's doing there. No, just kidding. Yeah. So now the weird thing is that there's forums full of odd speculation about what happened to these cabinets. Because as far as I understand it, they're not currently on display at the Smithsonian and haven't been for a while. And whether or not they're just sitting someplace in a storage facility or what. But yeah, so you can Google that if you want. But yeah, the fact that they were on display at least for a short while is kind of cool.
Indeed. Turning our attention then to a very little bit of console news, we look to Japan as Namco moves to Famicom.
Namco's Masaya Nakamura signed a licensing deal with Nintendo's Hiroshi Yamauchi at the beginning of August, which will see Nintendo give Namco access to its latest developments for the Family Computer games console, and Namco will release games for the Family Computer displaying the trademark Family Computer owned by Nintendo. The Family Computer has become the biggest console in Japan, having sold 1.2 million units since its launch in July of 1983, but almost all games for it have been from Nintendo itself. There are about 20 games available, and Hudson's Lode Runner became the first third-party game for the system. Namco's introduction of Galaxian makes Namco only the second third-party on the system. The porting of further titles will follow, and Game Machine magazine says that the penetration of high-quality video games in homes will, quote, create a wide appeal to the public opinion about the usefulness of video games, end quote.
That last little bit there, no doubt, once again, a callback to how video games are currently being portrayed through the adoption of the new law regulating arcades.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, I mean, Nintendo had originally been planning to do the same thing that every company has always planned to do up to this point, which is they were just going to make all the games for the Family Computer themselves. They gave Hudson some special disposition to release some games because they had partnered together on a BASIC for the Family Computer, but they weren't really planning to open the whole thing up. Namco, seeing that this was a big new hit, their engineers took it upon themselves to reverse engineer the Famicom and create a Galaxian port. And then they basically went to Nintendo and said, we're going to release this thing. Like, we can do it together, but we're going to release this thing. And so Nintendo came to an agreement with them, and they were the first true third party in that sense. I mean, obviously Hudson preceded them, but it was just kind of a little different how they got involved. And after that, Nintendo realized that they had already realized even when Namco came to them that they just weren't able to keep up with demand for new games. And so they opened the whole thing up with, certain stipulations and contracts, obviously, but opened the whole thing up to third-party development after that.
Now, and here I have to ask, because we've talked in the past about Nintendo's licensing agreements in the United States and how those worked. And Lode Runner, when it was released in Japan for the Famicom, does not have a Nintendo license reference on the cart or on the box. Now, the US release, of course, does come out, with the Nintendo seal of approval, blah, 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 blah. So what exactly was, or do we have any idea what the license agreement looked like? Because the text that we have here is that, they'll share the latest developments in the technology with Namco, and they'll put this logo on there. Is Nintendo manufacturing the cartridges in Japan? Is Nintendo getting a percentage of the sales? What's the agreement like? Do we know that?
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact details of the agreement, but at this time, Nintendo was not manufacturing. They were getting a cut of the sales, but the first few contracts they made with, I forget the exact number, but with the first 6 or 8 companies that they made licensing agreements with, the terms were much looser and much more favorable to the third parties. After that, they cracked down, and future licensees had to deal with more stipulations, including Nintendo doing the manufacturing of the cartridges. And this would lead, which I'm sure we'll cover when we get there, to a big kerfluffle between Namco and Nintendo in 1989 because the term was for 5 years. So that original contract ran out in 1989, and Namco wanted to renew under the same terms. And Nintendo said, no, we're not renewing those kind of favored nation contracts that the original third parties got. You're going to have to be subject to all the restrictions of everybody else. And then Namco said, then fine, we're not going to put our games on your system. And Nintendo was like, okay, sure. Come back to us when you're ready. And of course, it ends up Namco needed Nintendo more than Nintendo needed Namco, and they had to come crawling back. Though, flash forward, this is a big part of the reason why Namco very quickly backed to the Sony PlayStation just a few years later, because they were very upset that Nintendo had treated them in that way and wouldn't renew their preferential contract. So yeah, it's not the full range of restrictions. They're never as restrictive as in the United States. But after a couple of years, even in Japan, the contracts would be more restrictive and require that Nintendo manufacture the cartridges and whatnot.
Gotcha.
But as Japanese companies are getting into the console game business across the sea in the United States, Parker Brothers may be getting out.
Computer Entertainer reports that it is getting harder and harder to find Parker Brothers games at retail. Part of the problem is the high price of cartridge software itself. Target is planning to drop the line, and if Parker Brothers does quit the 2600 and 5200, those systems will be left with virtually no third-party games.
Yep, Parker Brothers was kind of the last one still hanging in there. Obviously, Activision still making some games too, but kind of the last of the companies that didn't strictly have to be in video games, that was still trying very hard to keep it going. And that's about over with.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of talked when I talked to Tom Dusenberry about this. I think this is what he was referring to as Parker Brothers was the #1 third-party publisher. And there's still, I mean, there's tons of ads in the magazines at this point from them, for their ports of Popeye and their Star Wars games and all that stuff. I mean, they're still going strong with it, but just like with Activision and their massive write-offs, that cartridge software inventory is just not moving.
Absolutely. That does it for consoles. Still at a bit of a nadir, but as the Namco story shows, perhaps that is starting to slowly change, at least in some parts of the world. Now we turn to a computer headlines where Atom woes continue.
Coleco's Atom computer has been a constant topic here for months due to its poor sales and technical problems. Rumors are circulating that it may have only sold 40,000 units so far, but Coleco has told Computer Entertainer that it does not give out any numbers and would not confirm or deny this number. Educational software maker MicroLearn has lost patience with the system, though, and announced that it will no longer support the Atom and has canceled all planned releases.
I mean, we're almost being cruel to the Atom by this point, continuing to report on it, Carl. I mean, my goodness.
Oh, come on. They've got one more killer app coming. There's a killer app coming. I mean, Dragon's Lair. Come on. Is we're going to have that Laserdisc add-on any day now, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, a couple of, a whole bunch of notes on this one, because, the Atom is, I mean, I'm just obsessed with the details of this thing. So first, Coleco has announced some high-profile licensed games, such as 2 games based on the upcoming movie 2010, a sequel to the sci-fi classic 2001. One game will be an action puzzle title, while the other will be a text adventure. The action game will appear on cartridge, so also be playable on the ColecoVision, while the text adventure will only be available on Datapack. The long-awaited Dragon's Lair port will also be coming to the Atom in the 4th quarter exclusively on Datapack.
Yeah, Datapack's going to capture all the wonder of the Laserdisc game.
It's still a mystery to me who developed this port. It does get ported later on to home computers in England by Software Projects, but we have no idea, or at least I haven't been able to find who was the developer of the Atom version. Because I'd love to talk to this person, because in my humble opinion, they did a fairly good job given the horrible, horrible task they were given. But that's just me and my weird rose-tinted memories of that game. Okay. Another big news item, Coleco has also instituted a new program whereby they are giving retailers $175 worth of Atom software for free, which, in their words, effectively reduces the wholesale price of the Atom to $475 from $650.
That's not how that works, but sure, Coleco.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Coleco claims that retailers who have used this effective discount to reduce the retail price of the Atom to $499 have seen significant, their word, increases in Atom sales.
They sold 3 instead of 1.
Exactly. According to the Associated Press, quote, some analysts suggested the move might be designed to clear Coleco's Atom inventory as a prelude to the company abandoning the home computer market. Coleco denied any such plans.
How dare they be so down on the Coleco Atom, whose time is just now arriving.
So let's just put this in clear. So for those listeners who didn't quite follow the shenanigans here, they're selling this thing wholesale, not retail, wholesale to stores for $650. They're then handing them what they're calling $175 worth of software for the Atom so that the retailers can put that on the shelves and try to sell it. And then they're telling the retailers, well, what we've really done is reduce that $650 you paid us for the Atom down to $475. So you should now sell the Atom in your store for $499. So you should be taking a $151 loss on the hardware because you might be able to sell this software that we gave you for free, which had a manufacturing cost of pennies. For us. Yeah, this is absolutely insane. Well, okay, and now here comes another one. Coleco has finally started shipping the Atom disk drive, which costs $300, and the 64K expander for $200.
So for assuming you're getting the Atom at the reduced price for a little over $1,000, you can pretend you have a Commodore 64.
If you squint really, really hard.
What a bargain.
Oh, yes. And then on October 30th, the Financial Times reported that Coleco had announced that their increased promotional activities for the Atom, so this is the end of the month now, that the other stuff was the beginning of the month. And on October 30th, Financial Times reported that Coleco had announced that their increased promotional activities for the Atom have seriously hit their quarterly earnings. Their pre-tax earnings fell by about $30 million. That must have been a lot of software they handed out as a result of the promotions, leaving the company with a meager $3.8 million in profits for the quarter. The company warned that near-term uncertainties, their words, in the consumer electronics market were such that 1984 operating losses in this sector could offset earnings from the traditional toy business.
Because remember, folks, sorry.
Sorry.
Because remember, folks, Cabbage Patch is still a hit at this point.
As we reported last 40-year jump, they are still trying to keep up with demand, and the Cabbage Patch dolls are still hard to come by at retail.
Yeah, I mean, the Cabbage Patch are printing money, and that's all getting eaten up by the Atom.
Yeah. The Atom is just inhaling inhaling the money. It's insane.
Indeed. But Adam's not the only cheap home computer that's running into a little trouble, as Oric on the ropes.
UK computer maker Oric is suing its distributor Prism for £4 million, while Prism counters by saying they are being charged £115 for Oric's Atmos computer that sells at retail for $99. Also, Oric is being sued for £200,000 for unpaid ads and apparently owes creditors £4 million.
Yep. The home computer gold rush in the UK is over. The market has settled around a couple of winners, and there is no place for all of these other also-rans, including the Oric.
Yeah. The Oric is gone. Now, the thing that is being touted about the Oric is they're trying to position themselves as we are the British machine. And it's just not working out for them.
Indeed. But truly, there's really no room in the market for any more 8-bit competitors in the UK, which is why we also learned that GEC drops MSX plans.
That's right. And GEC, or GEC, the UK company that had financed Dragon Data and is the UK marketer of existing Dragon computer stock, has suspended its efforts to release an MSX-compatible computer. GEC says it had problems getting components, and the Dragon experience has colored its view of the home computer market.
Yeah, it's the great shakeout. I mean, there were way too many of these cheap computers trying to win a piece of UK market share, and it's over. The Spectrum and the Z64 have won.
Yeah, and you either develop for that or you don't sell any software. So it's over. It is, and it's kind of scary because there's a lot of people that were hoping that this was going to be the second industrial revolution for Britain, and it's like, okay, we still have the Speccy, I guess, and there's the Amstrads, but they're not being assembled in England. Mm-hmm. So that's it, folks.
Yep. And you may think that this next headline is counter to that narrative, but just wait until you hear the summary. As Sega to launch MSX in UK.
More MSX manufacturers have announced systems for the UK market. Yashica has announced their YC64 and Sega their Yino DPH64. While the Yashica machine would get released in France, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands, the Yino DPC64 would get released in France, but without a Sega branding or marketing.
And neither of them ended up coming out in the UK.
Yeah. It's the MSX machines. I mean, it's such a weird, incoherent, disorganized launch in Europe.
Yeah.
That it's hard to imagine what consumers would have thought seeing various ads for these machines in different places. Are they compatible or are they not compatible? What does it mean that it's an MSX? And it's just nobody's going to have economies of scale.
Absolutely. But of course, there is still one 8-bit challenger that has not just found a niche, but is actually thriving across the European marketplaces, which is why Amstrad bullish on CPC.
Alan Sugar, CEO of Amstrad, predicts that the company's new CPC computer will make up 45% of the company's turnover and profits by the end of its 1984-85 fiscal year ending in June. Sales of the CPC are on target to hit 200,000 this year, with 600,000 the following year, which will include major rollouts in West Germany, France, and the Scandinavian market. Amstrad has pulled out of the VCR market completely for now and will be offering a new computer system this time next year.
Yep. I mean, we've talked about it before, so there's not really much more to say, but it's just, he may not have the crazy pie in the sky ideas that Uncle Clive has, but when Lord Sugar builds a product, it's for a reasonable price and it works. And sometimes that's all it takes.
Exactly. And it's an interesting little side note. This exit from the VCR market is explained with the fact that there's so many cheap machines coming in at this point. And unlike the MSX, the VCR is something that everybody understands are compatible machines, regardless of the manufacturer. So people don't really care who's making the VCRs anymore. And the cheap machines that are coming in have basically just undercut his ability to be in the market in a profitable manner. And he actually says that. He's like, we might review it again, come back to it, but right now we just can't turn a profit in that market. And computers, of course, have the advantage that they're not all compatible with one another. And if you do establish a system, then you kind of have a captive audience for at least a couple of years.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, turning our attention to Commodore prepping 128.
Commodore's next machine, most likely to be revealed at the January CES, will be the C128, which will have both an 80-column display mode as well as a standard C64 mode and include a built-in disk drive. Now, the built-in disk drive thing is not going to come to fruition. That would have been nice, but they're going to save that for the Amiga and later on the 128D. But so this idea that there's going to be a new Commodore computer coming, that it's going to be C64 compatible is interesting, but I don't really know who it's supposed to appeal to.
Exactly, because if you want to play C64 games, you just buy a C64, and there's nothing on the 128 that really lends itself. I mean, because at that point, if you need something with more power than the C64, you're moving on to the 16-bit machines, the 32-bit machines out there. You're just not going to do a souped up Commodore 64.
Well, but come on, it's got an 80-column display, a Z80 processor, and it can run the operating system of the future. It'll run CP/M.
What more could a guy ask for?
And if you wait 40 years, it'll get a great port of Eye of the Beholder, and on a second screen, you can actually have AutoMap.
What crazy times we live in, Carl. As we turn our attention to our next two stories, I would like to remind our listeners that we sometimes have a little fun on the show here by announcing developments in real time. So our next headline, Sinclair denies rumors of expanded Speccy.
On the October 4th issue of Popular Computing Weekly reports that Sinclair Research says that an expanded Speccy would encourage Z80 programming by developers when Sinclair wants 68,000 QL programs.
Carl, this just in, I'm being told Sinclair announces Spectrum Plus.
The October 18th issue of Popular Computing Weekly reports that Sinclair Research has announced the Spectrum Plus, a 179-pound, not weight, but British pound, 48K Spectrum with a QL-style keyboard, which will be on sale by Christmas alongside the 129-pound chiclet keyboard Speccy 48K. All the add-ons for the Speccy will still work with the new machine, although it probably would have been better if they were built in.
In the words of Ross, Carl, pivot. The QL is a disaster, and they're like, oh, I guess we should have actually stayed in our niche as a games machine after all. So now we'll put out the Spectrum Plus with the better keyboard of the QL and hope that will keep the public buying our computers. I'm sure that'll work great.
Yeah. The problem with the Plus, as rightfully identified immediately by Popular Computing Weekly, is that it has no real extras other than the keyboard. And anybody who's ever seen a Speccy that in a functional form, it makes the Sega Tower of Power look like a stable construction. Because you need to have an extra cartridge in the back for everything, for printer hookups, for joysticks, for pretty much everything. And so, yeah, not incorporating any of that into the Plus is it's 50 pounds, which at the time, I mean, was almost 2.5 to the dollar. I mean, you're talking over $100 just to have a decent keyboard.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Indeed. And there are problems abounding with prices of home computers in this period, as home computers have the price right, just not the power.
The main editorial in this month's Byte magazine talks about how the current batch of home computers are priced correctly to become mainstream home appliances, but won't be useful to the average user until they are powered by 32-bit processors, a megabyte or more of memory, and compact but high capacity and high-speed mass storage, like compact discs. All of this hardware will make the necessary multitasking software possible. Until then, the only machines that will be truly successful are those that find use in the business realm.
I mean, they're not wrong. This is kind of the collapse of the home computer concept in the United States. And obviously in Britain, it's different, where they find a lot of use from the 16-bit or 1632 hybrids, like the Amiga and the ST. But in the United States, it's really, which is where Byte is based, it really is true. There was no way in that economy, in that market, to get a computer of a price consumers would buy with the power that consumers would want. Obviously, in the UK and some other European countries, it was a little different, but they hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that they're listing these stats at this point in time, with this level of accuracy. I mean, the one thing that's missing is the mention of networking.
Right.
I mean, they're not foreseeing, or they're not saying that people will have to get an internet connection to make this work. But, the mass storage is really going to be the thing that makes it all happen. And the fact that you're going to need at least a meg of memory, which at this point in time, I mean, we're talking about, 128K will be the upgraded version. That's the kicker. That's the killer app right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Little side note here, in the UK, The Guardian reports that three biggest home computer makers, Sinclair, Acorn, and Commodore, all agree that the coming Christmas season will be the last big one for cheap home microcomputers. The the A and B social classes have now made the dive into this market, and the C1 and C2 consumers are next. After that, they all agree things will be much smoother and more capable. Things will be much smoother and more capable machines will begin to permeate the market. Communication options such as accessing information and software over phone lines is going to be the breakthrough use for computing, but no one is quite sure when that will happen.
Everyone's making good predictions here in 1984.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just because they've got these machines sitting in front of them and they're all realizing just how limited they are. I don't think I added a notice about it, but there's also a review this month of Print Shop, the very first version of Print Shop for the Apple II. And they're like, I guess this is okay for people to make like a card, but they're just like, who really needs this is the conclusion of the review. And the fact that it's going to become the killer app for so many people on computers for the next 7-8 years is, kind of revealing.
Indeed. And the only other thing that I wanted to point out here is, of course, because this was a British article, it was all about class.
Yeah. The American fiction of, you work for minimum wage, but you're middle class. No, you're not. Lawyers are middle class. Everybody else is sorry, dude. No, you're working class. Just accept it. But
Moving on, though, our next report is that games on cassette are dead.
In the US, at least. Computer Entertainer reports that the market for software on cassette in the US seems to be all but dead, as those still using cassette drives are migrating to faster and more reliable hard drives.
Yeah, and really, this has been going on for some time. I mean, I'm sure there were some people still clinging to cassette, but the US moved over to floppy and then to hard disk mediums far faster than other parts of the world did, particularly the UK and Europe.
Oh, definitely. I mean, floppy drives have killed it, but this move to hard drives, especially on PC, and probably that's going to be the kicker, because that gives you so much more leeway. And as any C64 owner can tell you, those load times are just going to be harsh.
Indeed. And as everyone is moving to those more fancy discs, bookware mania explodes.
The bookware trend seems to have no end, with more publishers getting into the business of converting books into games. Infocom has secured the rights to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Epix has Robots of Dawn. Hutchinson Computer Publishing has Frederick Forsyth's The Fourth Protocol, while Spinnaker will be adapting multiple books under its Trillium label, including Shadow World, which actually started out as a game and was then adapted into a book by Alan Dean Foster. And in the UK, Mosaic has released The Saga of Eric the Viking, based on the Terry Jones novel.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, it's coming at a time when, particularly in the United States, the computer software industry is still trying to figure out its identity. There was the crash of the video game market, which really had action games on the outs, even on computer platforms. And there was this idea that the computer user was perhaps slightly more sophisticated, that instead of comparing this to the music industry or the film industry, that we were really more akin to the book industry. And I mean, this bookware thing is a big deal for a couple of years, as the industry is just trying to find itself in the wake of the huge upheavals following the video game crash and the home computer crash.
There's definitely that, especially given that text-based games have a market. Especially Infocom has shown that that is a viable use for computer games. Another phenomenon that I think we do need to talk about here is the idea of licensing existing media for games. We had it obviously with companies like 20th Century Fox using their library of movies as the basis for games. But Activision getting Ghostbusters, I think, is also playing a role here. And this is also the early 80s. The cross the media licensing thing is exploding. Toy and Hobby World, that's a trade publication for the toy industry. They have a great article about it this month, and they're talking about how this phenomenon is happening at the same time as the licensing industry business of selling the right to use characters on merchandise is exploding. There's a giant international show for the industry being announced in Cannes. And the two largest U.S. groups, the Licensing Industry Association and the Licensed Merchandisers Association, are discussing merging, so that there's just one giant, and there's going to end up being a licensing show that happens every year in New York. It still goes on to this day. And we're getting all these shows in 84, because we're talking the fall of 84 here, shows that premiere fall of 84. That get tons of licensing. Airwolf, Miami Vice, V, Challenge of the GoBots, The Get Along Gang, Heathcliff, Muppet Babies, Rainbow Bright, Pole Position, Snorks, Transformers, Voltron. Some of these are licenses themselves, like the GoBots, Transformers, and Pole Position, Rainbow Bright as well. Others are basically made in unison with planned toys like Muppet Babies. It's kind of insane, and virtually all of the ones I just mentioned either came from games or are going to get video games. So it's just one of these weird moments where the transmedia thing is just taking off, and it's like, we gotta have licenses.
Absolutely. Merchandising.
And of course we're getting Spaceballs too. So
indeed. Turning our attention now to operating systems, Vision sold to CDC.
Mainframe maker Control Data Corporation has purchased VisiCorp's windowing software for PCs, Vision. The sale gives CDC the exclusive ownership of the source code and allows it to continue to develop the product, including its use for mainframes, while VisiCorp will continue to sell the product at retail. Yeah, this is basically the fall of VisiCorp. They've sold the family jewels, as Sid Meier would put it.
Indeed.
And CDC is actually going to continue developing this for a few years and try to sell it as a mainframe thing. I don't know how successful that is. But this essentially is going to take Vision out of contention as a windowing system for PCs, which is where it was supposed to be. So in the PC market, which is still DOS based, VisiCorp is now no longer a GUI contender.
Indeed. But one of the big GUI contenders has also hit a bit of a snag as Microsoft delays Windows again.
That's right. Microsoft Corporation has once again delayed the launch of Microsoft Windows. The program was first announced almost a year ago and was set for release in November of 1984, but has now been pushed back to June of 1985. According to the company, they weren't able to shake out all the bugs in the system on time, but promise that when it is finally available, it will be, quote, finely tuned and bug-free, end quote.
Now that's funny. That's a good joke, Microsoft. A-level trolling right there.
Yeah. And this is what I was alluding to earlier with the Mac, because they've got a GUI that's pretty much useless, but there's also no other GUI out on the market right now that's even worth discussing.
Absolutely.
So they get to shape the world's view of GUIs on machines in the home or even at the workplace for at least a little while longer.
Absolutely. Turning our attention now to the peripheral market, InSonic plans ad campaign.
InSonic, the company founded by many former MOS Technology employees who had worked on the C64 and were sued under the old trade name of Peripheral Visions by Commodore for allegedly using Commodore tech in their proposed Atari 2600 add-on keyboard, has signed up with ad agency Giron Hoffman Goranson Incorporated of Boston to promote their digital instruments, home computer peripherals, and their new line of digital sampling keyboards.
Very nice.
Yeah. Now, InSonic is actually going to be a very big player in this market for a while. And the whole idea that they had to change their name and everything else because the Commodore lawsuit was still hanging out there is an issue. But the big thing here is essentially they're it's the people who made the SID chip, and obviously, if you're in the know in the retro community, the SID chip is the gold standard of 8-bit sound. And yeah, so this, just to let everybody know, this is where those guys ended up. And they're going to play a big role in this market for quite a few years to come.
Yep. And also a big role in early sound cards.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
And then we end our look at computers with a little bit of racism, Carl, as crackers get organized.
Not those crackers. Popular Computing Weekly reports that a new pirate group called International Cracking Agency, based in Holland, is distributing cracking tools throughout the continent. CRL's Clement Chambers says, quote, "It's getting so bad that you can't release a new title slowly through Europe. 2 weeks after the program is launched in the UK, pirated copies are available in a number of other countries, and you haven't got any market left," end quote. He added, quote, "If we could find out who is behind this international cracking agency, they'd be in the Thames with a set of concrete wellies," end quote.
My, oh my. A
Yeah.
little violent there, sir. But yes, and of course, it's very noteworthy that this is a group coming out of Holland, because, of course, Holland will become one of the centers of the cracking scene, then will become one of the centers of the demo scene, and make some real contributions when it comes to 16-bit computer programs and beyond.
Oh, definitely. Now, the group that they're probably talking about is International Cracking Group, not agency, or at least this is what they get known as later on. And I'm not saying that I've seen intros from them in the past, but I've seen intros from them in the past on games that I definitely purchased legitimately.
Notorious Argentine software pirate Carl Kuros, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. But yeah, the spread of these tools and the spread of the software all over the place is being made possible because we have a convergence now of the old school phone phreaking with the modern computer cracking communities. And that's how the software is being distributed. You know, somebody's got a phone line, is making a illegal international phone call, boom, they've now downloaded the software from someplace else. And like you said, they're going to get really good at programming these things because they got to bypass the copy protections. They've got to figure out how to, dump the code down and everything else. And you're going to see some real talents coming out of this community, making some pretty amazing stuff over the years.
Absolutely. Turning our attention then to online news, we begin with Playnet launches nationwide.
Playnet Incorporated of Troy, New York, has announced that their online service for the Commodore 64, which includes chat, bulletin boards, file sharing, and multiplayer gaming, is now available nationwide. For just a one-time fee of $30 and a $6 monthly fee and a $2 per hour fee, anyone with a C64, a modem, and a disk drive can log on Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. or all day on weekends and experience the future.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow, Carl.
Oh, definitely. I mean, come on. We're getting now online services, which, unlike the more traditional ones like CompuServe and so forth that are already out there, this is not using a giant database, a database of information or news ticker services as the backbone of the service.
Mm-hmm.
This is really concentrating on, you just want to chat with other people, leave some messages, play some games. We've got a service just for you. And the fact that they have this much smaller overhead is also going to make them more profitable. And it's sort of a recognition of, and we talked about this, I think last episode, the 30-year jump, September 94, that, there was that that survey of Mac users, what do you want to do on the internet? I want to, study about history or whatever else. And no, the reality is you want to sext with somebody else over the computer and hope that the other person's the gender that they're talking about. And
indeed.
and these guys are recognizing it. It's just basic stuff.
Of course, there's also the shopping aspect, Carl. And we also have word this month that CompuCard hits 1 million.
Online and phone-based retail company CompuCard International Incorporated has announced that their individual membership base has exceeded the 1 million mark compared to just 350,000 in October of 1983. Yearly membership fees of $25 allow members to access their database of over 60,000, quote, consumer durable products at discounts up to 50%, end quote. The database The database can be accessed either by phone, over a 1-800 number, or via computer.
Very important to the history of video games, as one Ken Williams would be quick to point out to you.
Yes, because CompuCard will later be known as CUC and will be the owner of several major game publishers, including Sierra and Blizzard, before scandal will take them down.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, across the pond, Micronet to take on CompuNet in the UK.
Micronet, the British Telecom's online service, will be launching their C64 modem and software packages. Commodore has recently launched CompuNet in the UK and has advertised that its users will be able to access Micronet services, but this will be limited to British Telecom's View data service, not the interactive services, as Micronet will have proprietary interface software. Both modems will cost £100.
That is a chunk of change right there.
That's a huge chunk of change. I mean, when you're talking about a Speccy only cost you $129, This is a very expensive piece of hardware. And the fact that if you want to access both services, you need to have two of these damn things. It's just unbelievably expensive. Now, the Popular Computing Weekly editorial is a bit worried about this fracturing of an admittedly small and fledgling market, aka C64 users in the UK that will be going online, and wonders if it wouldn't be better if they just worked together on a standard for information that all modem users could access.
There's a thought.
Yeah, everybody talking to each other at the same time on the same system. Go imagine that. And Micronet has only gathered 11,000 regular users in 17 months in the UK for all platforms, a very dire showing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Again, we're seeing several of these stories over the last few months, and it's similar to what we're seeing in our 30-year jumps as well when it comes to online services. It's like everyone knows this has got to be a thing and it's going to be huge, but they can't quite figure out how to get there.
Yeah. Because nobody can figure out, okay, the only way for us to make money is to charge a monthly fee. So you can't make it compatible with other services, because if you made it compatible with other services, who gets the fee? Mm-hmm. And the problem then is, if you can't figure out who gets the fee, nobody gets the fee.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really like the early railroad industry, right? Because you had all of these small railroads building track in all of these places at different gauges, where trains from one company couldn't run on the rails of another company, and the whole thing just could not take off as a universal transportation system until the government stepped in and mandated the standardization of the gauges. Like mass communication, just like mass transportation, only works if all of the masses can use it and use it in a shared space of some kind.
Exactly. And I think that it's so sad because the potential was there already at this point. Yeah, the data speeds and everything were very slow, but you were dealing with just straight text.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that could have been done at this point had there just been some kind of agreement to create a standard, and somehow make it work. But I mean, it's just not an option yet. Too much was standing in the way.
Next, we turn our attention to Carl's favorite topic, semantics, as we ask ourselves, a video text or video text?
A great United Press article discusses the many problems facing the nascent video text industry, starting with the many different names the services go by, including video text with no T at the end and video text with a T at the end. Are the mixed messages about what users are supposed to get out of it? It's clear that the many different providers are cannibalizing what market is there. One industry insider does suggest that turning video text into the useful use of home computers may be the industry's savior.
Yeah, I mean, really not much more to say. It's what we were just talking about in conjunction with Micronet and CompuNet, just in a slightly different field. It's the same idea that it's just with all of these services competing against each other, it's not going to work. It's not going to grow a viable market.
Yeah. Well, in the one BBC service, the one Micronet service you could access with CompuNet was their view data, which was another word for video text.
Yeah.
Because that has been established as a standard, at least in Europe. In North America, there is no standard. There's several different providers, which again splits the market. But, had you been able to turn video text into the thing that you use the computer for, that would have been great. But it's not going to be long after this that the video text is simply going to be something that's available on virtually every television set in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you don't need the computer for it any longer, unfortunately.
All right. We end our online news with game creators get chatty.
Yes. Computer Gaming World is reporting that game creators have been taking to the web, or well, not the web at this point, but basically going online to chat with their fans. It's becoming a real way for the communication channels to be opened up. And the GameSig Adventure Game Conference, this was an event on CompuServe, brought together a whole bunch of different creators, among them Lord British, for example, coming online to talk about his games, especially with Ultima 4, still in the works at this time, and giving people a little bit of a preview of what's going to be in the game. There's also Michael Berlin and Scott Adams, amongst others. Now, this idea of people actually being able to talk to the game creators in real time seems to be really, really popular for those who can actually get on. And this kind of live event seems to be something that CompuServe is trying to promote more and more of in order to get more people to spend more time on the service.
Indeed. So Lord British was the first TikTok star. Is that what I'm hearing?
He's definitely there. I mean, I'm not going to say he's the first TikTok star, but when you think about the kind of people that would be gravitating to these online services, adventure gamers, and this is something that Al Lowe told me when I interviewed him. The number of people that are hardcore who want to figure out puzzles and stuff like this in games, they're a limited crew. but they're also the people who are dedicated enough to spend this many hours in front of a computer. They're also going to be the ones who are going to go online, and they're going to be the ones who will want to talk to the creators because they're totally obsessed with, what's going on in the game, how do I interpret it, blah, 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 blah. And Graham Bayless, he also, around this time period, next couple of years, is going to be doing one of these chat events and then jump around to different other forums on the server. And that's how he's going to meet his wife. So, this is where the geeks are going because only the geeks can figure out how to use this stuff. And,
absolutely.
The idea of the creators coming together and chatting publicly, it's not just online, or there's also an article in this month's Computer Gaming World about how there was a panel of game creators at Origins 84, which is mainly role-playing and board games. But they had Danny Bunton was there, Mike Cullum, Sid Meier, Chris Crawford, Ro Adams, Robert Woodhead, and Richard Garriott all on the panel together. And and the first question was, which computers are you targeting? And it's obviously Crawford's like, I'm targeting the Macintosh now that he's no longer on the Atari payroll, and everybody else is like, yeah, no, we're developing for Commodore 64.
Yeah,
it's indeed. Clear straight through. It's like, yeah, no, we're all developing the Commodore 64.
Yeah. Very interesting. All right, then. Turning our attention to a small amount of publishing news, ISBN adds software.
Yes. The International Standard Book Numbering Agency, which issues standard numbers and barcodes for books, has added microcomputer software to its system. More than 10,000 software titles from 1,500 companies have been assigned numbers by August, according to Byte magazine. And this is a big relevant point because what it's going to make possible is essentially the big software chains that we're going to see in the next couple of years. Because, there's a central database. You don't have to put in every code yourself. It's simply there's a number. Boom, your entire inventory system can be imported and doesn't have to be created exclusively for your operation.
Right. Very good.
Yeah.
And Antic reviews the art of computer game design.
Atari Computer Magazine Antic has a review of Chris Crawford's book, The Art of Computer Game Design, Reflections of a Master Game Designer. This very interesting tome tries to break down what a game is, how game design must be approached, and, from my cursory reading of a few chapters, is pretty insightful.
Yeah, I mean, Crawford was a fascinating guy till he kind of went off the deep end. He was one of the first people to approach game design as a true discipline and to kind of come up with core principles and guide people along the path to being a game designer. So he really is fascinating. And this is a kind of watershed book, even though things got crazy a few years down the line. At this point, he is a true pioneer.
Yeah, and I included a link to the archive.org version of the book in the show notes. Like I said, I didn't read the whole thing, but I probably read about 20, 30 pages of it. And it is really, really insightful how he approaches the game design aspects. So definitely give it a read.
Absolutely. Turning our attention then to legal news, Nintendo beats Universal on appeal.
Universal City Studios Incorporated filed suit against Nintendo, claiming that Nintendo's game Donkey Kong violated Universal's rights to the movie King Kong. Universal sought an injunction against Nintendo, which the trial court denied, and instead granted Nintendo's motion for summary judgment, as no prudent purchaser would confuse the origin of the product, aka Donkey Kong, with Universal's King Kong. Universal appealed this decision to the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, which affirmed the lower court's decision.
So that's not quite right.
Okay.
Because it's actually very interesting. You didn't even have to get to the point of the confusion argument, because turns out King Kong, through a series of interesting shenanigans, was in the public domain, and Universal knew it was in the public domain because they had successfully argued it was in the public domain when they wanted to put out Dino De Laurentiis's remake in the 70s, and had to fight off the remains of what had once been RKO Pictures, the company that produced the original King Kong. So they actually were suing over a bogus claim.
Ooh, that'll get you into trouble.
They had to pay Nintendo's legal fees.
That's expensive.
Yeah. It's I forget, it's been a while since I've researched. I forget the exact chain of events, but the King Kong movie was actually based on a book. And the book King Kong, through some set, or the book that King Kong was based on, it may not have been called King Kong, but I forget the exact circumstances, but it was essentially accidentally ended up in the public domain, because back then, before modern copyright law, it was much easier to accidentally not copyright your work or not have the copyright transfer at a given point. So it was actually in the public domain, and Universal was well aware of that fact.
Ooh, yeah, no. If you can prove that they were aware of it, that'll cost you. That'll cost you big time. And what you're referring to with the copyright expiring back before the Copyright Act of 1976, you had 76 or 77?
Yeah, it was 76.
76. You had to renew the copyright on in regular intervals. And this is why the old Fleischer cartoons, like the Superman and Popeye and Betty Boop cartoons, are mostly in the public domain today, because somebody at Warner forgot to extend those back in the early 70s.
Indeed. But while Universal is having not much success in one court, its parent company is going after another company as MCA sues Atari.
Movie studio MCA has filed suit against Atari Corporation and Warner Communications over unpaid royalties on Atari's E.T. game, as well as The Last Starfighter and game tie-ins for the upcoming Dune.
I think we probably reported on some of the earlier MCA. I mean, obviously we talked about ET, but some of the licensing that MCA and Atari had been doing, and wouldn't you know, the whole industry kind of collapsed, and that changed things.
Yeah, I mean, and the weird thing here was the Last Starfighter game. We've talked about that before. That does get released under a different name.
Yes.
But the Dune license, this was the first time I had seen reference to Atari having licensed Dune.
Oh, yeah. I want to say a playable prototype turned up a few years back.
Because
I'm confirming that.
And I could not find it. And wait, okay. And now I Googled it, and of course I found it. So
there was only preliminary coding done. I mean, it was far from complete, but what little had been done, I think, has been unearthed. Like, it's not a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of looks like a really weird Pac-Man type of situation with some weird colors. So, yeah, I don't think that this was very far along at all, and it's only a 2600 game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that explains that. Yeah, and it does not look good.
He who controls the Dune movie rights controls the universe, Carl.
Yeah. Not sure if MCA actually got any money out of it, but hey.
Indeed. Meanwhile, a Commodore runs afoul of the FTC.
The Federal Trade Commission and Commodore Business Machines have signed a consent agreement in August under which Commodore agreed to not advertise capabilities its machines did not have. Specifically, the claim that the C64 would be able to run the CP/M operating system before the required Z80 coprocessor was available.
Textbook case of false advertising there, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, all those C64 users who desperately wanted to use CP/M.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like, why risk a federal investigation over CP/M capabilities? Like, why did they even do that?
Because
I mean, I think they thought it was coming and then it didn't, but it's just, what a silly thing.
Yeah.
Because who wants that?
I think they didn't think that they were going to need, or I think they were afraid that in a price comparison between the VIC-20 and the C64, and we saw this with some of their ad language when the C64 was launched, that this was like the business machine, whereas the VIC-20 was the kids machine, that there wasn't going to be enough software available to support it as a business machine, and that CP/M was the easy way to piggyback on this. And the fact was, at the end of the day, it didn't need CP/M to sell well, and it was going to get stuff like multi-plan and whatever else. So I think it was just an issue of them hoping that this would be a selling point. But again, just like the BBC machines kept advertising, oh, there'll be add-on cards, creating those coprocessors it's a lot more complicated from an engineering standpoint than I think a lot of people expected, especially the marketing people who just were coming up with random crap.
Absolutely. Now we end our look at October 1984 with a few miscellaneous stories, as we always do. First, learn to speculate, the video game.
The Commodities and Exchange Commission in New York, which has branched out over the last 2 years thanks to government deregulation into the realm of futures trading, has now developed a video game to help investors who are nervous about investing in such speculative trades, the ins and outs of futures trading. The game, COMEX, the game, cost about $70 and is available for the IBM PC. And I was actually able to find a copy of this online. And yeah, it's basically just a bunch of text, but it's supposed to allow you to figure out how futures trading works.
So that everyone can get in, and nothing bad's going to come of that in the stock market.
Of course not. I mean, now granted, the number of people who have investments in stocks are growing exponentially at this point because we're also getting the massive promotion of 401ks at this point.
Indeed. Meanwhile, Acorn dives into laser discs.
Acorn Computers of the UK has set up a new subsidiary, Acorn Video, to sell interactive video disc systems. The company has spent 2 years developing its system that hooks up to a home computer. They will be selling both systems for playback as well as Laserdisc media creation. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think this might be related to the Doomsday Book project, that massive Laserdisc project to store a bunch of information similar to the medieval Doomsday Book.
Could be.
Oh, it is. It is.
Gotcha.
And so this is the system that they're going to end up creating that with. Are you familiar with the Doomsday Book project?
Vaguely. I mean, I know what the original Doomsday Book is, and I've heard of the Doomsday Project, but I don't know huge amounts about it.
Yeah. There was a whole thing a few years ago where they had the Laserdisc, but they couldn't actually read it, and they were afraid that it was going to start having disc rot. So there was this whole thing about trying to recreate the hardware that would have been necessary to read it. So they were able to finally recover the data off of the old Laserdisc.
Nice.
Yeah.
And finally, as we often have to do in this period of the crash and post-crash of so many different industries, we need to pour one out and have a moment of silence for another company involved in the video game industry. This time it is RIP Hasbro.
Human Engineered Software has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The software publisher had grown too fast and is the latest casualty of the collapse in U.S. software sales.
As you learned all about in your epic marathon acid trip of an interview with friend of the show, Jay Balakrishnan.
Yes. As he told me, he went into Christmas of '83 with very a large inventory of cartridge software. He could not get the normal chips in time and was using rewritable chips in the cartridges, which were much more expensive. And so the unsold cartridge inventories that he had were that much more expensive. And it just basically, I'm abbreviating a lot of other steps, but essentially tears down the company. And it never really recovers from this. On October 8th, Avant-Garde Publishing Corporation of Eugene, Oregon announced that they had reached an agreement in principle to purchase Hasbro. They're going to purchase it, and it's not going to be long for this world as a label. It's going to go the way of the dodo.
Indeed. And that's it, Carl. We made it.
Oh my goodness, and we did it all in one night. Well, it's 2:30 in the morning here, but hey, who's counting? That means, good sir.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You still have a task before you can do that.
Oh, you're right. The quote of the month. Haha. So, this one comes from Popular Computing Weekly. And on the dilemma faced by Sinclair and Commodore, and this is a quote from the editor of Personal Computer Weekly. He's talking about the dilemma faced by Sinclair and Commodore, who are repackaging and rejiggering their existing 8-bit computers, because Sinclair's got the Plus, Commodore's got the 128 coming down the pipeline. He wrote on the 25th of October issue, quote, "The problem is that there is no such thing as a good time to launch a machine which is incompatible with your existing base of software. If he can continue to sort the company out, watch out for something daring next year from Jack Trammell's new style Atari," end quote.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? He is accurate. And it goes back to what we were talking about in the DOC and Department of Corrections about the brute force approach that was the IBM PC compatible. All of these really cool bespoke approaches to graphic processing, sound processing, etc., that machines like the Speccy and the Amstrad CPC and the Commodore 64 and later the Amiga and Atari ST all had, which gave you amazing results for the time at very low budgets, were never scalable. If you were going to create a next generation version of it, it was going to have to just be a completely new approach. And therefore, you are going to have to abandon all your old software. Or you're going to have to do very expensive things like basically reproduce the old hardware each time and still risk losing compatibility, which is what later happens to the Amiga with the AGA chipset.
Right.
This recognition that you're just going to have to either dump the old ones to do something new, and that there's never a good time. It's never going to be, well, this is the right time to upgrade. You just have to rip off the Band-Aid and do it. Jack is going to do it with the ST. Unfortunately, as we will see, and we've mentioned before, his relationship with retailers is not good enough to pull off that move. But yeah.
Yes, indeed.
It's fun. And so, yeah, this was a cool quote that I thought really said a lot about this moment in time. And now that I've done my last part, it's time for your last part.
Indeed. So it's always difficult in this period because it's such a transitional period. How do I capture a market in transition in a single word that isn't just a boring word like transition? But one of your headlines actually gave me the insight that I needed here, Carl. So the word of the episode is cracking. And I mean cracking in every sense of the word, whether it's Activision cracking into the computer game market or fighting games cracking into the arcade market or Japanese regulators cracking down on the arcade industry in the country, or computer companies like Oric and Coleco cracking under the pressure in their markets. It feels like everyone is either cracking into a new market like Namco on the Famicom, or cracking under the pressure and getting out of a market like Parker Brothers on the VCS. And that seems to sum up this period of transition that we are still in between the market crashes and the rebirths.
You know what? I think that is extremely appropriate and insightful. You're right. And there's a lot of cracking going on. Whole lot of cracking going on. So we'll see where this goes. Now, Alex, please remind all the fine listeners out there where they can find your work.
Well, they can find it, Carl, in the same place they've been able to find it for 10 years come September 1st of this year, which is They Create Worlds, theycreateworlds.com, the hub website, and podcast.theycreateworlds.com to get you directly to the podcast celebrating 10 years in September. Of course, that podcast is also available on all of the major podcast providers, iTunes, Spotify, etc. as well.
Very cool. Links, of course, in the show notes. And remember, everybody, you can find all of our past episodes up on the Patreon. They're all open for everybody, as well as the video version of our 7 Minutes in Heaven segments. And if you do find it in your heart, or you have a couple of spare bucks, help us out, okay? Cost for the servers and the Zoom and all that stuff are not cheap anymore. Okay, with that being said, have fun.